Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, 8th of November. Dennis Gradov here with Kasper Ozolowski with our pre-UFC 193 show. One last show before we head over to the UFC 193 press stuff next week, Cass. And it's a big show. We've got a big show for all the listeners out there.
Yeah, for sure. We got some sexy guests. Opening up the show will be none other than Ben Rothwell. Ben Rothwell returns to the show. Got a few things to talk to him about. We got a UFC champion, Rafael Dos Anjos, coming on the show. He'll be second. He's got a big fight coming up against Cowboy Cerrone at UFC on Fox 17. And then, recently retired, bona fide legend, Rich Franklin is coming back to the show. Got a whole bunch of things to discuss with him. So, it's pretty stacked. And then we'll be talking about UFC Brazil. And also just a few quick things we want to talk about in regards to Bellator 145. So, lots to discuss. We're not really going to be breaking down UFC 193. We're going to wait till we come back afterwards. And then we'll talk about the event.
Yeah, that's right, Cass. And just to follow on from that, we will be talking about some of the cool stuff that's coming to the channel next week, the UFC 193 coverage. There's some stuff already up on the channel that we're pretty proud of, but we'll get into that later on in the show. Also, if you guys haven't had a chance, follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. We love to throw up cheeky GIFs. Sometimes we have GIF-offs with people. That happened during this UFC card, so check that out. We love having a chat with you guys. And also Facebook, which is facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. Give us a like. 2 different social media platforms. So for Submission Radio, 2 different social media, strategies and content. We don't put the same stuff up on both channels because we want to give you guys as much sort of different stuff as we can. So jump on there, communicate with us. You can shoot us a message. Let us know what you think. We love hearing from you.
Yeah, you can send us nudes. We don't mind nudes. Just a quick shout out to FightLiveTV.com. It's a place where you can watch a whole bunch of international and local fight organizations such as Bellator, such as Glory, just a whole bunch of options. Legacy FC 48 is coming up. It's on Saturday the 21st of November. Just in case you didn't know, Legacy FC, it's become a breeding ground for some of the top competitors in MMA, with UFC stars such as Holly Holm, Sage Northcutt, and Thomas Almeida, who recently fought at Brazil, and those guys have all recently emerged from its exciting roster of fighters. Don't miss out on seeing the next big things live and exclusive on Saturday 21st on FightLiveTV.com. And if you didn't know, now you know. Without further ado, I'm pretty sure our first guest is on the line. So, Dennis, take it away.
Our next guest was supposed to fight in the co-main event of UFC Dublin until his opponent had to pull out due to injury. Nevertheless, he is still the number 7th ranked heavyweight and the owner of the UFC's most iconic laugh. It's a pleasure to welcome Big Ben Rothwell back to Submission Radio.
How's it going?
Very good, very good. It's great to have you back on the show, Ben. Now tell us, since you found out your fight's been cancelled, what have you been up to?
I stayed a few days in Ireland past the fact. I hung out with the fans, which was great. There really are some amazing, people to be with, and really they embraced me as if I won the fight. I didn't even get to fight that weekend. I was really disappointed for all of Dublin, losing their main event and the co-main event. And just, it was a rough thing to see the fans, get kind of burned that way, but they still had a blast. They had fun with the UFC that they had. They took care of me. So I had a lot of their support, and a lot of people felt bad for me for seeing that my opponent got matched with a fight before I got. But, that's just kind of how life is. I mean, you guys watch MMA long enough, you'll know that, judges' decisions aren't the only thing that isn't fair. So it's kind of the way it is. I've been doing the sport for 16 years, and I kind of learned to take the punches and roll with it. And I find sometimes that bigger opportunities can present themselves later on, and I feel like this might be one of those situations. I know they're talking about me getting rematched, hopefully in January. As far as opponents go, nothing has been set, but they haven't officially done anything yet, so that could mean some different things. I'm not sure yet, and I'm just been back training home in Wisconsin and just getting ready for whatever comes my way.
Gotcha. Ben, when you say rematching, are you talking about like doing the Stipe Miocic fight, or are you talking about like a rematch with, say, Mitrione or someone else you've previously fought?
No, rematched, like they're going to rematch me with another, because I was scheduled to fight.
Yeah.
They're going to, so I could rephrase that. Just they're going to match me with somebody soon.
Sure.
So I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Because Stipe and Andre are obviously already matched the fight.
Let me ask you, Ben, obviously a situation like this is pretty negative, but have you sort of found out how supporting all your fans are? Because it seems like there's been an outpour of support from fans all around the world when they found out this happened to you.
I was really, it's one of those pleasantly surprised. I just kind of threw out some little things on Twitter and stuff. I'm not big on social media. I kind of stop and check in from time to time, obviously when I get closer to a fight as well. And I just threw out a few things, and it was really crazy, the response to just how little things got out there. Like, the very first tweet I had was to Stipe, and I said, I tagged him and said, "Are you serious?" It was crazy how many headlines that little sentence got, and got everybody interested. And then within later that day, it got announced he was injured. So that kind of sparked the whole thing. And then when I did little things when I was in Ireland after the fight, when the fight was officially canceled, I kind of just poked fun at the situation. I figured there was no point in getting upset about it. It was a bad situation for everybody. So I just tried to have some fun with it. And it seemed like the fans really took a good response to it. We had a good laugh, and it kind of caused everybody's support of me to really come out. He said, it's not just having fans where I'm from. It's like I'm seeing I have fans all over the world now. And, it's a pretty big voice when they all get together. And I think the UFC's been listening, because that support translated right on to Fox Television, and, the anchors, Cormier and Kenny Florian and, Ariel Alani, a lot of these media, MMA junkie guys, a lot of the media just in around the world has been and kind of speaking up for me too. So I really appreciate each and every one of them, man. The fans, what I fight for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny you say you're not much on social media, because when you went on your Twitter, before this interview, just to have a look at things, there was heaps of tweets, heaps of retweets. You're a bit like the man of the people, especially in Dublin. And the Irish are obviously a passionate bunch. Did you find yourself feeding off the people there, and did it sort of ease the spirits a bit?
For sure. I mean, it was really nice for me as the UFC had already set up. They had brought in guests, Andre Arlovski and Rory McDonald and Max Holloway as guests. They were coming in just to kind of be there to be social. So they kind of put me into that role with them. And what a great, setup that was, because Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it was like UFC Fan Expo of Ireland. And I was just doing appearances and hanging out, and the fans loved it. And there were some situations where, they had us blocked off in VIP section, and I jumped the fence and went into the crowd, and they really liked that too. And I love it, man. I was like, I try to tell the fans all the time, no matter how scary I look, you just got to come up and say hi to me. That's all you got to do. And the Irish fans had no reservation. They came up, and I swear, I told at the Q&A, there was about 3,000 people, and I told them, hey, I'll sign and take photos with everybody in here. And they took me serious. I think I got a picture with everybody. So
wow.
It was really cool. I'm really happy to do it.
Now, you mentioned Andre Arlovski was there, Ben. We have to ask you, what was the conversation like between you two? Obviously, he knew that your fight didn't come through. Did you guys have any interesting moments together?
We did, actually. When I was younger, obviously, I was more of a fighter before I became a martial artist. So I never wanted to see anyone that I might fight. It was mean mug everybody. It was a fight. Well, 16 years in this, I've become a martial artist, and even if I have to fight somebody or not, I can be their friend. I can be everybody's friend. And the night that we compete, that's something all in itself. Who I become that night is something in itself. And anything before and after that, it's fine. I'm just Ben Rothwell, and I can be cool to you. And Andre is very professional as well, and he gave good response. I came up to him. I told him, I showed him some of my stuff that I was saying. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm calling you out, and stuff like that. And he's kind of like, talk to UFC, you know what I mean? He just not me. He just kind of almost kind of laughs, yeah, he knows, and this is what we do. And then kind of from there on out, the rest of the week, he was trying to scare me throughout the week. He was hiding behind elevators and stuff like that. And I kept busting him. That's what's so funny about it is, so it was good to have a good laugh with him. And he's kind of telling me about his life, and that he moved to Florida, and that he, still, because he lived in Chicago. He lived just an hour from me since I think he's been in the UFC. So I was interested to hear that he moved away, and, he still travels to Greg Jackson. So it's kind of interesting to hear how other guys are doing things. And, he's very professional, and definitely, like I said, most of the guys in the top 10 in the heavyweight division with me are guys I'd probably make my best friend. We obviously have something very special between us. I mean, we fight in front of millions of people against each other, and it's a unique situation, and I definitely respect these guys. So it was cool. Good time in Ireland.
That's awesome. Now, we're curious, had the fight happened with Stipe, did you have any surprises planned for the fans for your entrance music and your outfit? And if so, will you save them until your next fight? We know you used Dracula's music last time. Anything like that planned for this one?
I mean, the only thing I can really talk about without telling you too much is just know that if I'm the first one out, I have one song. If I'm the second one out, I have another song. So that's like my little thing that eventually people would catch on to. And I don't care if you figure it out, but it's just like, it's more for me. It's more, what happens. And I guess nobody's heard my first song yet, and Stipe was ranked higher than me. So it was going to be something new, and everything that comes with it is just, it's got to remain a mystery. That's why you guys want to tune in and see me fight.
Well, hopefully you come out first in your next fight. Now, me and Casper were a bit into the conspiracy theories, and we were sort of hoping that possibly when your fight got cancelled in Dublin, there was a chance that you'd end up on UFC 193 here in Australia, possibly against a guy like Stefan Struve, with Rothwell getting another opponent. Was that possibility at all available to you? Did anybody try and bring that up with you?
It's just the fact that it's less than 2 weeks away already, and I'm still recovering from Ireland. When I was in a very, very specific type of training camp, that when I went to Ireland and then I didn't have to fight, let's just be honest, my diet, my training schedule, things, I basically turned it into a vacation. Now I'm back and I'm recovering, but the fight in a week from now, that's not going to be my best performance. Now, December 19th, if you guys have checked the media, you'll see that I've been very vocal about filling in if Alistair Overeem gets hurt. I said fighting Junior Dos Santos is the fight that I want more than anything, because to me, he's the number one contender. He's the guy that's ranked right behind the champ and Velasquez. So it's like, that's who I asked for originally. Now, I know that my name is in the hat that if Overeem or Junior get hurt, I basically said I'm the one that's going to step in. I told Dana White, I said, as far as your main event goes on at night, you don't have to worry. You'll have a main event no matter what, unless both guys get injured. But as of right now, I've been very vocal. And obviously, with Andre Arlovski and Stipe, I mean, injuries happen, and that's just the beginning of January. Yeah, I got to be ready for that too. I mean, Stipe's back might go out again, right? It just happened, so.
So would that, just to clarify, Ben, so would that mean that you're going to be training all the way basically from now until, through New Year's, Christmas, and until January?
Yeah, I've been training this week. I've been basically, I started training the Monday. I started training just like I had been training prior to getting ready for the Stipe fight. So yeah, I'm back on it, because look how crazy it is of guys getting injured. I mean, Stipe was allowed to pull out just a week and a half before the fight, and the injury was, wasn't severe, that literally the Tuesday after that we were supposed to fight, he's posting a picture of him in a cage training. That blew my mind more than anything of this entire situation, is the fact that he was willing to post a picture of him in a cage the Tuesday after we were supposed to fight. That blew my mind. Like, that was probably one of the poorest thought out pictures to post. But, guess it doesn't matter when you got a contract to fight somebody in January, right? So.
Yeah, well, it's something that, it's a valid point, because a lot of people do wonder if he's injured, why does he get the fight with Arlovski instead of you? Did you have a chance to speak with Dana White or anyone about in the UFC about why?
Yeah, it's one of those things, guys. It's beating a dead horse. There's nothing good of me going to talk about it. The decisions were made, and now we just got to ride this thing out and see how it happens.
Yeah, so they explained to you, though, why they went with Stipe instead of yourself? They explained their decision-making process, or is it still something that you're still not sure about?
I mean, their reasoning is that Stipe's ranked third and Andre's ranked fourth. And that was, pretty much the end of it.
We imagine Dana would want to get you back in there as soon as possible, but looking through the heavyweight rankings, I mean, okay, you've been saying for a while now you want Junior Dos Santos, or you've already faced Alistair Overeem, but let's say it's not those guys. It does seem like you may have to wait. Would you take a fight with someone who's ranked lower, like Frank Mir or Josh Barnett, to get back in the octagon?
Those are obviously the two names getting thrown around the heaviest. So we're just trying to wait to see, what they're going to do. I mean, I know both guys have openly said, like, yeah, they're ready to fight. They're willing to fight whoever. So all three of us are kind of situation, and we're just waiting. And there was a big set of announcements that just happened yesterday for January 30th, for beginning of February. I thought I was going to be a part of those announcements, and it didn't happen. So I'm really not sure what's going on yet.
Well, there's another scenario in which it looks like perhaps the winner of Junior Dos Santos and Overeem may go on to get a title shot. You've actually beaten Overeem, so would it frustrate you if he ends up getting a title shot before you?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're supposed to do. You know, I can only do so much. I can only keep beating who gets put in front of me, you know.
Well, the other option would be if Junior wins, it's possible the UFC might hold off from giving him a title shot just because it may lead to, a fourth fight with Cain. Do you think that could be the perfect time for you to fight Junior, especially because he's the guy that you've wanted to fight for so long? Maybe that way they sort of do you and Junior before he gets a title shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation is that if him and Overeem happen, I'm probably going to have to hope that I get a fight to fight somebody in January. Then I think I could strongly, vocalize trying to get that fight again and actually get it. I think Stipe and Andre, that kind of the result of that fight's going to matter. So say Stipe does beat Andre, I don't think they want Stipe and Junior again. So I think that also helps open up my shot to have the Junior fight. If Andre wins, I think that could also screw up Junior because they might want to throw Andre back in. I think Andre's got this whole resurgence. He's got I think he's got more people around the world want to see him fight than Junior for the title. That could, but that could mean nothing. You know what I mean? It's like the UFC's matchmaking is something that a job I don't think anybody wants, and we have no idea how complicated it really is and how hard it is, and we just got to kind of let them do their thing.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot more complicated than people give it credit for. Well, you mentioned Stipe and Arlovski's fight. Take us through it technically. Who do you think is going to win that fight?
I know it's a bad answer. You guys don't want to hear it. It's really about who shows up to fight that night. I know it's one of those things that's just technically breaking them down. They have lots of things to neutralize each other and, ways to win. And I really feel like it's a very good match fight. And it's just really who's going to plan and who's going to execute their game plan, because I know both of them use game plans, and I know they watch footage and stuff like that. So that's just the way they fight. And I think it's just a matter of who's going to be ready to do it the night of the fight.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Ben, when we spoke to you last time, you mentioned that you'll be looking to take a bit of a break, possibly 9 months after the fight with Stipe. Obviously, that'll went out the window. Does that plan stay intact now, or would you possibly be looking to have more consecutive fights?
I know I shot myself in the foot with that.
Yeah.
I actually heard about, what are you, crazy? It's 9 months. They didn't like that too much. And I'm just like, no, I'm just saying it's not a big deal if it happens. Here I was ready to fight 5 months later. I showed up in Ireland, I was ready to fight. So I did it. I beat that 9 month curve by a good 4 months. But here I am. I'm going to be about 9 months out, So it's so I get for opening my mouth, guys. Thanks.
Well, sorry to cut in there, Dennis, but let's say you fight in December, January. After that, it's crazy to even ask because you don't even have a fight lined up, if we can even ask that far ahead. But, if you do fight in January, would you see yourself taking a big majority of 2016 off, or would you kind of want to get back in there soon? Because that's probably when the title picture will clear up, somewhere around mid-2016.
Yeah, I need to be active. I know that right now. I know I said taking 9 months off, but it isn't going to do me any favors. And I guess I just really came off wrong. I said it, but I was in my mind, meaning, if it happens, I can deal with it better, but I need to push right now. I need to push and fight more. That's, and if you have a tough fight and your body's busted up, hey, you got to deal with it. You don't want to hop into a fight busted up for no reason. But my last 2 fights, if I continue to keep repeating my performances, yes, I could fight very soon after. Both fights, I've walked away nearly unscathed, and the Overeem fight, my arm was jacked up, but it wasn't broken, and it only took a few weeks. So I could have been booked again after that. But obviously the timing was right. I had a good training camp for Mitrione and was able to take care of it. And I feel like I put myself into a fight about as reasonably as quickly as I could into a fight that mattered. You know what I mean? And it was 5 months. I think it was a good time. It gave me a month to get to the Fan Expo in July. I got to hang out with the fans. I didn't have to worry about anything. And then I got home. I started training camp, and I was ready to win in Ireland. So I definitely am going to push for 2016, guys. I definitely need to get some fights in. I know I'm not going to get the title fight in a fight. I'm not a fight away unless I got to fight Junior DeSantos. So I gotta get these fights out of the way, get the title.
And we're very excited to see what happens. Now, switching topics for a second, but still staying in the heavyweight division, we never really got your thoughts, Ben. What did you think about Fedor not going over to the UFC? Because a lot of fans did want to see a Ben Rothwell-Fedor fight, obviously, because you two are legends in the sport. Were you disappointed when you saw that he was signed over to Japan instead of coming over to the UFC?
It's kind of like a yes and no. For me, I'm kind of more in the middle. Like, honestly, I didn't really give a shit. But if he did, I could have got excited and been like, yeah, cool. It'd have been a great. I'm sure any heavyweight in the top 10 would have liked to fight him. I mean, it's a true legend, and kind of see where he's at again. The fact that he didn't, I'm not surprised. I don't think it's the competition as much as it is he's getting offered vast sums of money to beat up a tomato can. You know, who doesn't want to do that? You know, he earned it, and obviously he's gonna get, you know, millions of dollars to beat up a guy that has a losing record. You guys want to do that too?
Sure, why not? Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's kind of more business for him right now, you know. So it is. I think if he was truly serious, it's truly about the competition, they would have striked some kind of deal at the UFC that made sense for him, and he'd be fighting the best. The bottom line is, I can say this without hesitation: the UFC division, heavyweight division right now, is better than it's ever been since the UFC has been started. That I know for a fact. And I've been a fan. I've been fighting since 1999, so I've watched the heavyweight division my whole life. And right now is the time to. You want to prove you're the best, now is the time to do it.
Oh, for sure. And it does look like he'll be stuck in Japan for a couple of years or a few fights. If he ever does end up coming down to the UFC, we're guessing that would be a fight that you'd love to have if he ever does make it to the UFC, Ben.
Absolutely, sure.
Ben, just as we wrap up, I always want to sort of give you an opportunity to tell us a bit about your gym, Rothwell MMA. What's news at the gym? Tell us a bit about it.
Oh, at the Q&A, I got asked about any up-and-coming talent, and I got to mention James Bogdanovic. He's trains with me almost for all my since I started Rothwell MMA. I've gone the 4-1 in the UFC, and you know James has been basically training with me for all of that. So it's done a lot of things right, and obviously Luis Claudio is LCCT. So these are just some names of people you want to check out online and check them out. They're my coaches and training partners, and I they get excited when they see new hits on their social media and people checking out their, website. LCCT.com is Luis Claudio Combat Team. He's a Rickson Gracie second black belt ever, and he's a world champion jiu-jitsu from. He won the Worlds in 2012, so he doesn't compete often, but when he does, he does it big. So. Just shout out to those guys and just thank them. And the gym overall, and you just check it out, RothwellMA.com. You can see the photos. Our gym's really been busy lately and just really enjoying a good time. And it's pretty awesome to have a gym doing what it's doing in a place like Kenosha, Wisconsin. The reason I say it, as you say Kenosha, Wisconsin, people say, where? You know what I mean? It's just in a small corner of Wisconsin, but I like it that way.
Well, when we were searching where the gym was, we did have to Google map it a couple of times. So that's true. Now, finally, Ben, before we let you go, there's a big event happening here in Melbourne, UFC 193. Before you go, we'd like to get a prediction from you. Who's winning the main event between Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm? Give us a Ben Rothwell perspective. Does Holly Holm have a chance?
Well, every fighter, in the UFC, should have enough skill to win a fight, no matter what. But Ronda Rousey's amount of skill and amount of experience and amount of ways to win the fight, I think, greatly outweigh Holly Holm's. I believe that Holly's going to be a huge underdog, and rightfully so, because Ronda Rousey is very skilled at what she does, and she knows how to do it every time. And I believe it's going to produce another win.
There you go. You heard it from the man himself. Ben, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Guys, don't forget to follow Ben Rothwell on Twitter at Rothwell Fighter and check out his gym, Rothwell MMA, at rothwellmma.com. It's very well worth a visit if you're in the area. And as always, thanks so much for coming back to Submission Radio, Ben. It's a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Love to shout out to the Australia fans, and you guys are awesome too. We love you guys, kind of like in Ireland there too. You guys are great fans, and yeah, if you guys in Australia like to have me, I'd love to be back, and I'll see you guys. Absolutely.
Anytime, Ben. Anytime you're free, we'd love to have you down. And there you go, guys. Ben Rothwell, I believe that's his third appearance on Submission Radio. We talked about Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm and UFC 193 just a second ago. Obviously, the UFC are doing a big UFC embedded for the event. So just to remind you guys, for all the Aussies in here, the embedded will be premiering on Fox Sports, channel 503, 8 p.m. this Wednesday, November 11th. And just a bit of information, because we've actually gotten a sneak preview at the entire embedded, and it's extremely good. They've really outdone themselves this time. You've got Ronda Rousey, you've got Holly Holm, you've got obviously Joanna, you've got Valerie Letourneau, which is a really good insight into, some of those girls. I mean, Ronda, obviously, she's not short on exposure, but some of the other girls you don't get to see as much, and it's a really great insight into some of their lives. So just a reminder, obviously, in anticipation of UFC 193, which is Sunday, November 15th for all your Aussies, and I believe it's Saturday, November 14th for everyone outside of Australia. One of the biggest UFC events in history, UFC 193. So the embedded Rousey vs. Holm, it's going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the lives and training camps of 4 elite fighters leading up to the epic showdowns at UFC 193 in Australia, Melbourne. So you've got in the embedded, you've got undefeated women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey. Of course, she's training for undefeated opponent and former world champion boxer Holly Holm. In the meantime, you've got women's strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She's preparing to take on Valerie Letourneau. And interesting thing about it, in the actual embedded itself, you'll be seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mark Wahlberg versus Stallone, a whole bunch of other celebrities. We saw Jada Pinkett Smith, and the whole thing is narrated by Aussie actress Ruby Rose, who a lot of you guys would have seen and probably enjoyed in Orange is the New Black, and if you're here in Australia, in a whole bunch of other things. So just a reminder, this Wednesday, November 11th, 8 p.m., channel 503. Don't forget to check it out. And if you're not in Australia, I'm sure you'll be able to see it on the UFC's YouTube, and we may even be providing it a little bit later on in the week. So enjoy that, guys. In the meantime, Dennis, pretty sure we're ready for our second guest.
Our next guest is the current UFC lightweight champion and will be fighting Donald Cowboy Cerrone at UFC on Fox 17 in a rematch of their 2013 fight. Rafael Dos Anjos, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, you've had a while being the UFC champion. Before we get into it, tell us, how's your life changed with the belt? We imagine there's a lot of caviar dinners and champagne flowing.
Yeah, man. Life as a champ has been great, but anything like change on my mind, I'm still hungry to train. I'm still training hard, and I still feel I have a lot of things to do on this division. And so my hard work never stops, I keep training hard, focus on my career, Now I got the belt. Now I want a bigger challenge, on my life. I want to be the best lightweight ever.
Well, the last time we spoke with you had a few injuries to heal up from. How's the body feeling? You had a torn MCL. Is that all healed up now?
Yeah, it's all great, man. 100% now. So I just finished some like hard training this morning. I did some sprints at the field, really hard pace. And so I did some ice bath. So I'm here recovering because tomorrow is sparring day. And man, it was a rough training, but I'm ready to go. Body feel great, 100%. Weight coming down, see everything on point.
Very good. MMA, it's one of those sports that's extremely tough on the body. We recently saw with Khabib Nurmagomedov getting re-injured for a third time. It seems sometimes it can never really fully recover. How many more fights do you think you can get out of your body realistically, Rafael?
Yes, man. Like, I just turned 31, and I have 31 fights as well. And I have plans to fight until maybe 37, 38. And I think what is really hard on the body is the weight cutting. And maybe like some years from now, and maybe in a couple of years, I want to do some fights at welterweight, just to avoid just to have that extra 15 pounds. Like, but that's my plans. I still got a lot of things to do in this division, but I have plans on the future to do some fights at welterweight.
Wow, that's interesting. I don't know if we've heard you say that before. Let me ask you something, Rafael. This IV ban, it's coming into effect. I don't think you've gone through it before. How does the IV ban affect you? Is that going to make your weight cut harder? And is that one of the reasons why you might want to go to welterweight, just to not have such a strenuous weight cut?
No, I think not for the weight cut, but it's gonna affect the recovery. But I think I have a guy who is he was with me last time, and he always go with me for my fights, and he said he have a perfect recipe to do like the hydration back, like after waiting without the IV. So it's a new thing to try, and he said he have everything on point, and that's not gonna be a problem for us.
Weight cuts can be really, really tough. Almost every fighter has sort of a horror story when it comes to their weight cuts. What's the worst weight cut you've ever had? What's like the worst situation you've had cutting weight for a fight before?
Yeah, I think like one of I have two bad weight cuts. I have one on when I fought Glacial T-Ball, when I lost that fight, and when I fought May Diaz, I also have a really bad weight cut because I was making plans to cut the weight at my room, but day of the weight cut, I noticed my shower, my bath wasn't get hot. The water was coming cold, so not hot enough to cut weight. And so then we need to make change. We got a car. We went for a gym to do some sauna, and it's kind of break my time down, and it was kind of hard to make weight that day.
Yeah, crazy considering how he performed. Now, we mentioned Khabib Nurmagomedov before, Rafael. What were your thoughts when you saw that he was injured once again?
Oh, man, I feel bad for him. He's a young guy. I want him to recover because I want to fight him again. That's my will. But I feel bad for him. He's a young guy. He just, man, I don't wish anything bad for my opponents. I want them all the best. And especially he's being hurt for like you said 3 times in a row, and man, I wish him all the best, and I really feel bad for him.
Well, you mentioned that you really want to fight him, it's your will, but it seems like on social media at least Khabib had said he may never fight again. Would that really disappoint you if you never really got an opportunity to avenge your loss to him?
No, not disappointing me. I just like I said, I feel bad for him. Guys gonna retire. I think he's 25 or 26, and gonna retire on the age undefeated record. He's gonna retire at the age of 25 years old, but I think he's just mad right now. Just sad for a while. But once he recovers 100%, he's gonna come back fight. I think so.
That's what we hope as well. Now, we have to ask you just in regards to Conor McGregor, because the two of you had some back and forth at the UFC Go Big conference. So going back a couple of months now, but we haven't spoken to you since then. You were asked if you would be happy to fight Conor as opposed to Cowboy. I don't think you really got the chance to answer that question. What do you think if Cowboy, for whatever reason, got injured? And we hope that would definitely not happen. But if you got to fight Conor instead, would you be happy given the financial reward that would come with it?
No, actually, for me, my focus right now is on Cowboy. But if Cowboy gets hurt and they replace Cowboy with McGregor, I will be happy to fight him. I will be happy to give him a welcome in lightweight division. But it's not a fight that I would prefer fight McGregor than Cowboy. Whatever they put on my front, I'm gonna make sure I be in my best shape and keep my belt. But if McGregor for any reason want to come up, I would love to smash him.
Just on that topic, Rafael, you said the Conor McGregor fight was easy money in a recent interview. And that you would crush him. What do you think you'd crush Conor McGregor, and why do you think it would be such an easy fight for you?
Yeah, man. I on my whole career, I always did it the hard way. I never picked fights. It took me 17 fights to get my title shot, and it wasn't an easy way. And I think like McGregor, when he fought Chad Mendes, I think Chad Mendes exposed him, and I think like style wise, he's not a good fight for me, and I think his game he's a good fighter, but it's a bad matchup for him. Fight against me.
Personality-wise, it doesn't seem like you guys are necessarily friends, just from what we've observed, but you guys have a little bit of common. You fought with a hurt MCL against Pettis for the title. He fought with a hurt ACL in that fight you just mentioned against Chad Mendes. Is that something you respect about him, something that you guys have alike?
Yeah, of course, man. If you like, especially, like, I think when you fight, nobody is 100% day of the fight. Like 99% of the fighters are not 100% on that day. It's always some injury, some issue, but man, you gotta respect that, because I had my MCR there, and it wasn't easy. I got her like 3 weeks before, and I don't know how long before he got hurt, but it affected a lot of my training. I couldn't train, I couldn't kick for 3 weeks. I don't know about him, but like stepping into a fight, big fight with injury is not easy. But Chad Mendes got a 10 days notice, so for him it wasn't that hard.
Now let's talk about Donald Cerrone. Obviously, as you know, as everybody knows, he had a lot of allegations about you being on steroids. And then closer to the fight, he sort of said that a lot of the stuff that he said about you being on steroids was just because he wanted to bait you into a fight, and it wasn't a serious thing. I mean, steroid allegations are pretty serious, because once someone says it, a lot of fans start pointing the finger and start blaming the fighter for being on steroids. Do you think it was appropriate for him to spread rumors like that just to get a fight with you?
Yeah, man. This guy, I met him at Fun Expo, UFC Fun Expo, and I told him, hey, man, we're going to fight in December. I'm still injured, and he said, oh, let's do this in October or September. I said, no, man, I can't. I'm hurt, man. I can't train. I'm not training. And so 2 days later, 1 day later, he posted a Twitter, hey, Dos Anjos, let's do it on September or October. I talked to the guy like 2 days earlier than that, before than that. And I told him in December why he's putting Twitter, like trying to pressure me and make me look bad for the fans. And also make these accusations as well. But, I have a clean record. This guy doesn't have a clean record. He got caught once, on doing like diuretics or something. And I have a clean record. I don't make accusations. And if you don't have a clean record, you can't make any accusation for nobody. And so I got a USADA test. USADA coming to my house 2 or 3 weeks ago, and man, I'm just gonna show that hard work and dedication don't show the blood test. And everything I do, I working hard. I take my work seriously, and on December 19th, I'm gonna show that again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, you shocked the world when you beat Anthony Pettis, and you just mentioned about sort of other people accusing you of things. Kevin Lee, he's another fighter who was accused you of the same thing, being on steroids when he was on MMA Roasted, and he said, this is his quote, he said, I know for sure that RDA is on the juice. Are you surprised that so many people have accused you of this?
Yeah, man. Nobody. People. It's hard for people. Don't want to give you the credit that you deserve. And always they gonna try to make excuses. Like when Fabricio Werdum fought Cain Velasquez. Werdum won because of the altitude, but the altitude was for both of them. The altitude was for Fabricio as well. But Fabricio went there 40 days. He left his family and he stayed there for 40 days in Mexico. And Cain decided to go 2 weeks before. So, like, his fault, And when I beat Pettis, everybody make accusations. So with no proof, my blood test, my doping come like clean after fight. Everybody saw that, but people still talking. So the people don't like to give you the credit that you deserve. They always try to make excuses.
Now let's talk about the fight. I mean, you've beaten him once. How do you see the second fight going? Are you worried at all about the ring rust that you're going to have to deal with coming back to the octagon after such a big break?
No, I feel good. I was needed. I feel way more motivation now than I was for my title shot. Way more, because on the title fight I was like 5 fights in 11 months. I fought 5 times in 11 months. And I was just feeling tired, man, on that fight, And I think I got hurt 3 weeks before because I was like pushing so hard, got overtraining. My body was feeling so much. And I was needed that rest. Now I rest a little bit. I rest 5 months. And now I'm the best shape of my life. Now more motivation, mentally wise, good mindset, good spiritually, and man, feeling great, man. Just ready to go there and bring my belt back home.
Well, obviously you've got a lot of motivation because you feel good and you're ready mentally and physically. But I'm just wondering, in terms of Cowboy, you've already fought him before and you already beat him, and it wasn't a close fight. I'm just wondering, what is your motivation specifically for Cowboy Cerrone? What motivates you going into this fight, given that you've already beaten a guy like that?
Yeah, man, he's a tough guy, but I've been fighting the top guys of the division, and I'm pretty confident. I got to a level that man, now I get to know my body well, Now I know my body really well, and I feel on point, And this time that I took off with no training, it just gave more like hunger to train, I was like, I want to train it so bad when I was hurt, and I couldn't train it. So now I'm able to train. I've been training hard for like 3 months already, feeling great, man, feeling, stronger than ever. I'm happy. I just turned 31. I'm happy to be learn always new things. I'm surrounded about good people, and so I didn't make any change on my coach, my fight camp. Everything same, I got the right recipe.
Well, I'm guessing that you've obviously watched some of Cowboy's fights, while you've been on the sidelines. Do you see any improvements in his game compared to when you two fought originally?
Yeah, I think like we fought in 2013. We both improved a lot, but I think I improved even more, And the way that he fought against me in 2013, like he didn't improve that much, but he did some. But I think I improved even more. I become a different fighter, and but it will be a great fight, I'm not gonna win, like go there to try to win by decision. I'm gonna go to finish. And if I caught him with some right or left hand again, like I did on the first time, he's not going to come back.
Obviously, you don't want to give us your game plan, but in the first fight, you used your wrestling to sort of take advantage of Cowboy. Do you think you'll do a similar thing, or do you think you'll sort of stand with him more in this fight?
Yeah, I'm an MMA fighter. No, I'm happy to be on the level that I am. I got good wrestling, good like jiu-jitsu skills, Muay Thai skills. I'm gonna put all my weapons together and making him confused. Hit hard. do everything. Gonna do my mix, gonna put push in the pace, and I'm gonna bring my A game, and I'm gonna look, it's an MMA fight, I'm gonna do everything.
Mentally, Cerrone has struggled in the past when it comes to big fights. Do you see that as one of your advantages in this fight, your mental game?
Yeah, man. I'm going. I don't like to think that way. We all know that he always choke out a big fight, but I'm gonna go like with thinking that he's gonna be in his best shape and his best mindset of his life. That's why I'm training every day. I don't want to get in my comfort zone and think he's gonna choke out, and I'm gonna think he's gonna be on the best shape and best mindset of his life. But for sure, I will not have any goals on my mind, because every day I training hard. I kill all the goals. When I step on the octagon, I just think one thing: it's a celebration day. Nothing's going wrong. I'm gonna keep my belt. I'm gonna beat this guy.
Yeah, well, we absolutely can't wait till December 19th. We'll lay it down for us, Rafael. Just before we let you go, give us the prediction. How are you beating Donald Cowboy Cerrone, UFC on Fox 17?
Yeah, man. The way that I've been training, I've been evolving a lot my skills. Improving a lot my skills, and I don't see this fight going 5 rounds. Like I say, always go to try to finish, but sometimes we finish, sometimes not. But my intention is always to finish. I'm gonna make a prediction maybe on the second or third round by knockout.
Well, I mean, that's going to be one of the possibly most exciting fights of the year, guys. You could check RDA out on Twitter at Dos Anjos MMA, ANGOS MMA, and watch him fight Cerrone on the very stacked UFC on Fox 17 card, December 19th in Orlando, Florida. Rafael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hi guys, it's Jana Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, it's a pleasure to welcome a former UFC middleweight champion back to Submission Radio, currently a vice president at One Championship. He recently retired from MMA. We're excited to have him on to talk about what's next. Rich Franklin, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. It's good to be back.
Well, it's good to have you, Rich. Now, we saw that you got a bit of love from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on Twitter recently. Now, did you know that The Rock was a Rich Franklin fan?
I didn't know that. I'll tell you a funny story, though. I actually met him way before I fought in the UFC. I was fighting in a show in Hawaii, and he actually came to my fight, just a smaller show that I fought in Hawaii in my pro career before I was in the UFC, and he was there, and really just a really, really nice guy in person. So I've actually met him in person before.
Wow, what year was this, and what was The Rock doing there? Just checking out the show?
Well, I mean, it's in Hawaii, so I guess, at the time, this was probably, I'm going to say, like 2000, 2001, somewhere in that time frame. And it was in Hawaii, so, I don't know, maybe he was staying there part of the year, maybe he was doing some filming in the area or whatever, but yeah, I fought for an organization in Hawaii a couple times, and he was at one of the fights.
Okay, cool. Now, Rich, as fans know, you recently announced your retirement through an article you wrote on the Players Tribune. How has the reception been since you made the announcement? What kind of response did you receive from the fans?
It's kind of a mixed response, I guess. You have some fans that are like, "Oh no, Rich, seriously, I want to see you fight one more time." And then you have a bunch of other fans that, because it's been a while since I fought, they're kind of like, "Yeah, we kind of figured that would happen." So it was a bit of both on both sides.
Well, now that you're retired, can you level with us, Rich? How close did you actually come fighting again during your break?
Well, I'd say towards the end, as like before I actually announced my retirement, there was probably several months there, a good bulk of 2015, where I was really just kind of considering the pros and cons of taking another fight and having just with the work I'm doing with One Championship. I'm in Singapore right now on this side of the planet, and I'm over here frequently, and just it's difficult for me to put a good training camp together for a fight. I train every day still, but there's a difference between that and prepping for a fight. So as this year kind of went on, it was becoming more and more apparent to me with the time that I'd been out of the cage, and then I turned 41 in October, and it just seemed like the right time to pull the trigger. But up until that, there was actually on one occasion where I started actually prepping to begin a camp and all that kind of stuff. And it hadn't gotten to the point where I was selecting anybody for a fight or talk to the UFC or anything. But there was a time where I was ready to pull the trigger.
Wow, when was this roughly?
I would say probably about, well, maybe year and a half ago now.
Okay. I'm curious, Rich, how much was one championship a factor for your retirement? Like, do you think that if your plate wasn't so full and if you didn't have as many things occupying you, because obviously, it's a huge role, but if you think maybe if you didn't have so much on your plate, you may have been a bit restless and possibly had that one more fight?
For sure. If I wasn't basically heading out of the country every other month and doing the stuff that I do over here, then yeah, but you start looking at things. I have a good job and it's a decent paying job too. And when you start thinking about taking another fight and the fact that I'm out of title contention, so it's just one more fight for the fans to fulfill my contract, then you start looking at like is the money that I'm going to make actually worth the damage that my body is going to incur preparing for the fight and during the fight? And you kind of start thinking about those things. It's interesting how a 40-year-old fighter thinks versus a 25-year-old fighter.
Yeah, well, me and Casper had a few injuries in jiu-jitsu and MMA ourselves, and we're only in our 20s, and I think we're starting to think a lot like you, Rich. Now, how do you feel about Cung Le being the last fight of your career and that being a loss? Are you at peace with your career ending sort of on that note?
Yeah, you can't get those things back. So, for example, if I fought 3 more times and I won 3 more fights and they were impressive victories, then I still lost that fight. Even if I rematched Cung and I beat Cung, I still lost that fight to him. So, that's kind of the conclusion I came to, that it doesn't go away. Like you can't erase it. So it is what it is.
I'm wondering, was there a moment immediately after that Cung fight where you thought about retiring and you sort of decided to take your time with the decision? Or after that fight, were you completely convinced that you were going to fight again and return?
Well, listen, anytime as a fighter, anytime that you lose immediately after the fight, you're always sitting there thinking like, okay, let me make this wrong right. Like that's always the initial reaction when you lose, like, because as I've gotten more experience as a fighter, like I don't wake up the next morning and think like, oh, I'm not a good fighter. It's like in my 20s, if I'd have lost the fight, like my entire, I guess, ego would have hinged on that victory or that defeat. But then as you get older, you just realize like that you got outperformed on a particular night. Something happened, whatever it may be. And when you wake up that next morning, or typically you don't even go to sleep because you're thinking about the loss the whole night. Those thoughts in your head is like, I need another chance at this. Like you basically want to call the promoter and be like, let's redo this fight again and let me prove, quote unquote, prove myself that I'm capable of winning this fight. So there's always that, and then you take some time. I actually took some time and thought, like, do I want to retire? Like, is this a good time for me to retire? So it was kind of like I was ready to fight again. Then I thought about retiring, and then there came a time where I was ready to fight again. And then eventually, just like I said, with the stuff I have going on with One Championship, I finally decided, like, yeah, it is time to retire.
It's interesting because the stuff with One Championship is obviously keeping you busy. I'm curious, Rich, if you didn't have that one fight left with the UFC and you sort of finished out your contract with them, do you think you would have had a whole bunch of, at least a couple more fights for one, considering that you work with them and it would be so beneficial to the company to have you fight for them? I don't believe that I could actually. I'm not really sure. Just as I think, if I remove myself from this situation here, I'm not sure that it makes sense for a VP of a company to actually fight for the company.
I'm just also wondering, on that one fight with the UFC on the UFC contract, did you end up speaking to Dana White at all about it when you made the decision? And, what was his reaction if you did?
About the retirement?
Yeah, did you call him up and speak to him? Or I don't know if it's Dana that sort of deals with this nowadays. But yeah, did you call him and say, look, I'm not going to have that last fight on the contract, just letting you know?
No. I announced my retirement. I think there was a time when I was fighting with the UFC that if I was going to make some sort of announcement like that, like I would have basically called them first, because I was a huge piece of their marketing machine. Like there was a lot of stuff that was marketed around me. Main events were dependent on me. There were times when fighters, like for example, like when I fought Chuck and Tito got injured on the show, like the UFC called me, or the second time I fought Vanderlei, like that was a late switch to fight him when I fought in Brazil. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff where they really needed guys like me. And I filled that role for them. So if all of a sudden I decide like, hey, I'm going to retire without letting them know, they may have had months, if not years, of marketing kind of built around me doing an occasional event, or 2 or 3 events a year or whatever. So yeah, at that point in time I would have, but given the fact that I sat down with them and talked to them about me taking the job with One Championship, I've been over here doing my work, and I've been out of the cage for a couple of years at this point in time. Like the machine has kind of moved without me. I'm not a necessary piece of that machine anymore. And so I didn't really feel the need to kind of let anybody know. Now, after I announced my retirement, there was a couple weeks later that Dana had given me a call, and basically he and I just kind of shot the breeze on the phone for about a half hour, just catching up, seeing how things were going, and he was basically calling me to say thanks for a great career and everything I did for them.
Well, your career was remarkable. It was great. A previous champion, you fought the best of the best. There's been some issues with injuries and training keeping fighters from coming back. A guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov is a good example of that. Now, you're a guy that looks after your body and understands the importance of doing that. Is there a way for fighters to prepare for a fight without risking all those injuries?
No, not really. I've heard other fighters give interviews and stuff like that, and you'll oftentimes hear people say like, yeah, well, a fighter is really never 100% for a fight, and I won't say that that's the case necessarily, but I'll tell you, it's more often than not, a fighter is going into a fight with some sort of nagging injury. When, like, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was prepping for Chuck, I was drilling in I was in a guy's guard, and we were just doing a simple drill, just some movement drills where we were tipping each other's bases, and like he had kind of scissor kicked his legs on my waist and my knee, and kind of knocked me off balance. And when I went to put my hand, like I placed my hand on the mat to balance myself, my thumb got folded underneath me, and I tore I'm not going to say this right for the medical professionals listening. I tore the ulnar collateral ligament in my thumb, UCL, and I couldn't like when you make the like OK symbol with your thumb and your index finger, like OK, I couldn't even move my finger and thumb like that, and so I went to see a hand specialist, and they were recommending that I get hand surgery on this. On this ligament, and they said that I probably wouldn't have the strength in my thumb to ever grab hold of a wrist and keep that strength. And this happened probably, I don't know, somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks outside of the fight. So I finished part of my camp like wearing a hand brace that kept my thumb like locked in place. So I was having trouble like throwing punches and all this kind of stuff. And I went ahead. I actually thought about pulling out of that fight, but I went ahead and took the fight. And there's so many fights. I was like, I got sick before my Forrest Griffin fight, like where I had the flu and lost I don't know, somewhere around 6 kgs before the fight. Like I didn't end up having to do any weight cut that week. So I mean, it's just and I mean, it seems like every fight I could probably come up with a few things here and there, and it just happens. The problem is with MMA, unlike any other sport, is that the way I run my camp and the way that a different fighter runs their camp, they're completely different. Like there's not like a set routine of doing things. Like whereas if you play for like a professional, say, soccer team or something like that, like you have a complete medical staff, coaches that are running the practice. Like when you go from one team to the next, like the formatting of practice is pretty much the same. In the fight game, like you're pretty much left up to yourself to design your own camp. So when you couple that with a lot of guys that are in this fight game, even guys at a higher level that make it into shows like One Championship or the UFC, like they may not necessarily know how to run a camp. and they may not have the coaching staff until you get to that upper echelon. And then two, like I was saying, like with the incident with my thumb, like silly things, they just happen. They happen. You don't even necessarily have to be sparring or doing some like banging it out type of thing.
It's crazy, and it makes it all the more impressive of you. You know, you've always been looked at as a company man. You taking on all these fights short notice, and the Chuck fight, you know, that was when Tito pulled out. So it's crazy that you took all those fights. Now I could see like a Seinfeld situation where you can't make the okay sign, and someone makes you like, I don't know, a tasty soup, and they're like, "How is it, Rich?" And you're like, "You can't make the okay sign." They get a little offended. But anyway.
Well, fortunately, I have a left hand, and I could have done it with that.
Okay, good. See, yeah, you're a lot smarter than us, Rich. You told us stories of you training from BJJ, from tapes with your friend in a garage. Being, you know, in the sport before it went mainstream, did you find yourself training in a gym where guys were going too hard at any point? And did you realize the importance of sort of, you know, what people tend to call nowadays smart training?
Oh, Lord. But, look, you're talking about the beginning of my career. Let me tell you something. Every time I go to a jiu-jitsu school today, it's like I'm fighting for my life. Like half the time I leave, half the time I leave a jiu-jitsu school, it's like I feel like I should have gotten paid for doing that because I leave there just as sore as I did when I actually fought in the cage. Every time I go to a school, it's like, oh, well, Rich Franklin's here. He was a UFC champ. Let me gauge myself against him. If I can tap him out, then clearly I could probably be a UFC champ too. Like that's like the people's thinking or something. So when I'm traveling on the road and I grapple with people, like it is really difficult for me to find people that are just good at flow rolling and all that kind of stuff. That's why, like during my career, I had set training partners that I only worked with certain guys during a camp, especially like when I was in the middle of a camp. There's no way I would go into fight prep midway through and some new guy come into the school. Or even a guy that I knew, a guy that I didn't know, or a guy that I did know, and me switch up training partners. Like all my training partners were guys that I had rolled with for, years that I trusted, or guys that were, within our circle and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a terrible thing because, and it'll never go away. I mean, guys get on the grappling mat, and that's the first. We're competitive, so there's this male to male kind of primal alpha instinct of competition.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than when you go to training sore and tired and a new guy tries to push you to the limits and gets you. Well, let me ask you something. It does seem like there is a new breed of fighter, Rich. When comparing legends such as yourself, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, to the guys and girls like John Jones, Sage Northcutt, Ronda Rousey, Paige Van Zandt, etc., is it kind of crazy for you to see the evolution of MMA and the typical MMA athlete from when you began?
Nah, I mean, it's cool to watch it, but it's not anything that I didn't expect. Because these people that you're seeing today that are fighting are people that have seen MMA since the time they can remember. For me, the first time I remember watching an MMA event was I was 17 years old, 18 years old. And so basically, by today's standards, I would have kind of began my training at a late phase. But now, like I said, like John Jones, for example, probably grew up and he saw his first MMA event when he was like, I don't know, 10, 9, like as a kid basically, and said, I want to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Rich, reading your retirement letter, we were reminded of just how MMA used to be with many fighters like yourself coming up in bars without gloves or rules or weight classes. I'm just wondering, is there a rule or practice or something that you'd like to see changed about MMA to continue to sort of move the sport forward?
When I look around and I see like, well, I'll just say like with rule systems and stuff like that. I mean, at one championship we use a global rule set, and I was dead set. Like, in the States they use the unified rules, and so we allow kicks to the head and stuff like that to downed opponents and knees to the head. And when I've seen some guys that have been clipped with some kicks while they're on the ground, and as I've seen this actually unfold live, there isn't much difference between that and watching a guy just get kicked in the face when he's standing on his feet, really. But So as far as like the safety precautions go, it's just the way that MMA has moved historically, like the way that they've trained like the referees to be on top of the action to make sure that guys take minimal amounts of damage, and this is pretty much across the board for everybody. The way that like medical staffs have been trained in order to handle these injuries, and the medical protocol. I mean, specifically the medical protocol that we do with One Championship, taking our guys to the hospitals and all that kind of like all the steps that we take after a fight. Like it's when I see that kind of stuff, it is we've just gone through great lengths, considering that we're in a sport of we're in a full contact sport. I mean, you look at like take MMA and then compare it to the NFL in the United States, like American football, and like if you look at the number of concussions, I mean, the NFL has had to go through a series of significant rule changes over the last like say 5 years or whatever, where they've eliminated certain kind of hits and tried changing where they kick the ball off so that there's not as much speed between two players when they're crashing. And so I think that MMA has been real proactive with that stuff and doing the best that they can, given that this is a combat sport, but doing the best that they can to keep the fighters safe. If I was going to complain about anything, I think I would complain about the judging system in the 10-point must system. I'm not a big fan of it because you have to you either win a round or lose a round, and especially when they're non-title fights or non-main event fights, and you're fighting a 3-round fight, it's difficult. Like if you lose a round, it's difficult. And, you could lose a round like barely a 10-9 round, and then pretty much kind of draw us, You could have an even first round, an even second round, but one judges see it a certain way, and then pretty much just run away with and destroy your opponent in the third round. Yet you're still going to lose the fight, basically 2 rounds to 1. And that's one of the things that we've really been on top of over here at One Championship, is that we use a different judging system where we judge the fight in its entirety, and we have this judging criteria, and that's part of what I do. I worked with like Matt Hume designed our rule set and all that, and we spend time like every territory that we go to, like educating judges and educating referees how to implement our rule set and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it seems like another area of MMA where improvements could come in the future is the whole weigh-in system. We had a Gunnar Nelson on the program recently, and he was just talking about how he thinks something needs to be done so fighters don't have the opportunity to cut the ridiculous amount of weight that some do before
Easy
a fight.
Solution.
What do you think? Do you think weigh-ins on the day of the fight or after the fight? What do you think? Because you never really cut that. I mean, you did cut a lot of weight, but near the end of your career, you did light heavyweight. You went middleweight to light heavyweight. It didn't really seem like you were one of those guys that was going to cut like 30 kilograms to make it to a division. What do you think about this whole weight cut thing?
No, yeah, I think the most I ever cut probably was around 10 kgs, which is still, that's significant weight. I mean,
yeah.
And that includes like, I would say, maybe 12 or 13 kgs total, but my weight cut starts like 6 weeks outside of the fight. And that's the whole thing. It's really simple. Like just do same day weigh-ins, and restrictions on how many pounds you're allowed to gain before the fight. Because the problem, and I'm a big fan of that for several, as a fighter, I'm a big fan of it because I hate sitting around at weigh-ins, like sitting there with my coconut water and my peanut butter and banana sandwiches, waiting to step on the scale, like being miserable and cutting weight and sitting in the saunas. I choose to do sauna work. It's effective for my body, and there are other methods. It's not the only way to do it, but like, it's like rather than because I walk around at about 96 kgs, so about 210 pounds, and 210, 212, somewhere around there. So for me, like I have to do a little bit of work to get to the point where, like, because I basically want to keep my cut to around 20 pounds, so I want to be at 205 to make 185. But, if I was just fighting 205, like then I have basically like a 5-pound cut to get there. And it's not a difficult thing to do. Like, it's just making sure that I'm on weight for that day, like tailoring my diet leading up to the fight or whatever. And so, you would hear me talk about that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, the atmosphere, it's always been that way. Boxing and wrestling and now MMA, it's just the culture that's been designed in combative sports.
I guess with you, you say you would cut about 5 pounds, but I guess the biggest worry would be that there'd still be other people who would cut, the 30 pounds, the 20 pounds, or whatever the case is. Do you, and possibly just still do that on the day? Do you think there'd be a risk of fighters not, rehydrating enough if it was a same day weigh-in and they just go, you know what, I'm just going to do the massive cut to 170 and just hopefully I get enough water in me with the few hours to spare before the actual fight itself?
Look, it may take a young athlete to figure out how stupid of an idea that is, because flat out your body, it just can't perform. You can't process the liquids that fast. And now the UFC, like MMA, the unified rules, like WADA now makes IVs illegal. Like you can't IV for rehydration, which was a big part of me gaining weight. Like you're putting saline back into your body, so it's not like a foreign substance that I would ever like to wrap my mind around calling that like a PED type of thing. Classifying it in that category is just difficult for me. So I'm not even sure, like given the 24 hours, that without doing IVs that I would want to have to cut that much weight, because I know the difference that it makes in performance. You're not going to be able to do it on the same day, but just to eliminate like weight cutting and all that. And it would be from an organizational perspective, it would be good as well, because organizations always have problems with fighters missing weight. Oh, well, this guy missed weight by a half a pound or 2 pounds or whatever it may be. So this is no longer a title fight. It's now just, like we've seen those kinds of things happen in the past. And so if you were concerned about people overcutting weight and not being able to rehydrate the same day, it's simple. Like you just, when the fight's announced, like they have to do their medical physicals and they have to check their weight in with a doctor or whatever they're going to do. And then basically like their weight could stay the same, like through camp and all that kind of stuff. Like, you can't see more than like X percentage of change or something. There are ways to kind of ensure, because look, apparently guys can find ways to put foreign substances in their body and not get caught, but you can't find ways to hide your weight. Like if you have a system for it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where it moves from here on out. Let's discuss one championship. Just curious, Rich, how's everything going into the big event in Singapore with Ben Askren versus Luis Santos headlining and doing that big rematch?
Listen, man, I'm really excited about this fight because for the viewers, the listeners that saw the first fight between Ben and Luis last year in the Philippines, or was it? I think it was earlier this year. I lose track of time. I'm traveling so much, but I mean, Santos was the first guy that really gave Ben kind of a hard way to go. Like that's really tested his wrestling ability and all that kind of stuff. And I do believe that Santos was beginning to run out of gas. So I would hope that for this fight, he definitely put a little extra attention and focus on his conditioning. But of course the eye poke led to an unfortunate stoppage in that fight. And so these two guys have some unfinished business, man. And I'm really, really excited to see this fight coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, obviously the rematch ended in controversy, so I think a lot of people want to see that definitive, finish or at least definitive fight. We gotta let you go real soon, Rich. But let's quickly talk about your product, Armor Gel. Demi Maia was supposed to fight Gunnar Nelson at UFC Dublin, but got sidelined with really nasty staph. How much of a problem is staph for fighters these days, and how much does Armor Gel help?
It's huge. Listen, man, I don't travel without my Armor Gel. Just to catch like listeners up, like I've been working with this company for a while now. Armor Gel, it's a hydro-based gel, which means it's a water-based gel. It doesn't have any alcohol or petroleums in it, and it's made with silver. The company that makes this, American Biotech Labs, they actually mine their own silver and make this product. And I came across these guys at a food expo, and they started explaining the product to me. And they have FDA claims. Like it's basically, in its most basic sense, it's a gel that's basically designed for like cuts and lacerations and burns. If like you burned your hand on a stove or something like that, or major burns, they have some documentation of burn victims that they've helped and stuff. But Anyway, I mean, there's some great pictures of like the way that the way that you can use this stuff for like scar prevention when the skin is healing and all that kind of stuff. But I started talking to them, and they have FDA claims. Like this product, Armor Gel, has FDA claims against MRSA, against staph, against VRE, against different kind of funguses like Candida. So I use it on my ringworm and stuff like that, and it's very effective on my ringworm. And for me, like I can use it on ringworm, and instead of like taking a medication where I'm putting like pharmaceuticals in my system, or having to take like antibiotics for staph or something like that, like I can use this stuff instead. And with me traveling, like I was just in Cambodia actually last week, and I did a seminar a few days ago in Cambodia, and I walked into a gym. True story. I walked into a gym and I looked at the mats and I thought, like, have these mats ever been cleaned? Ever? And I didn't know. So I took my Armor Gel, which I don't normally do this on a daily basis, but I covered my entire body in it, because what this gel does basically is it's a barrier of protection against bacteria, and staph is a bacteria, and so basically it pretty much kind of like seals my body against this stuff. So staph it's been a huge problem, and it's starting to get some attention now. There was a tight end for the New York Giants in the U.S. for American football that had got a staph infection from an injection that he got in his ankle, maybe a cortisone injection or something like that. Wow. And he had to undergo 7 surgeries, and they were afraid that he was going to lose his foot. And wow. I don't know if he'll ever end up playing again or anything like that. But I reached out to him on Twitter, and I'm like, hey, bro, I heard what happened to you, and so I had my PR call his agent, and we ended up sending him some product, just like, look, if you got some guys on the team, whatever, just give them the product. Like, give it to them, because it's a bad problem. And I've given tubes this stuff to all the guys I train with and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, man, it's a good product. Like, I can get on a mat comfortably, knowing that I'm not going to have a problem, especially like if I have like a little scrape on my leg. Like, that's typically what I'll do. If I have a scrape on my leg or something like that and I'm going to go grappling, it's like, all right, I'll just throw a little bit of this on there, because people don't realize, like, you get on these mats and you're mixing so much sweat and bacteria from different people and stuff, and it's just this cesspool of organisms. And so yeah, and then suddenly when something like that happens, you realize, okay, I'm playing with something that's way greater than me here, and I need to be a little bit more careful.
Well, it sounds like Rich Franklin's the only one who got out of Cambodia without any staff. But anyway, let's move on to some fan questions that people sent in. Rich, we've got a fan question here from username Fedor Knows. He goes, what's one person you wish you could have fought in your career and you're disappointed that you never got a chance to fight? And also, are you also disappointed that you never got a chance to avenge your loss to Anderson Silva? Because for a while it seemed like it may be a fight that you may try and have before you left the sport.
I don't know. I think like one person that I wish I could have fought before I retired maybe is Jim Carrey, because we look so much alike.
He's wiry, man.
Yeah, he is. Like, I would imagine that if that guy did jiu-jitsu, that he would have just this amazing rubber guard and
he'd tell you jokes and stuff. It would be like a punch attack.
Exactly. That's it. He gets you laughing, and then the next thing you know, you're getting choked out. But and then as far as avenging the Anderson loss, like, this kind of goes back to the mentality I have about losses. Like, you can never take that back. And my first fight with Anderson, we made some huge mental errors, and a bit of that was arrogance on my end. I honestly, I thought, like, because I'm so much bigger and more muscular than Anderson, I really didn't think I would have a problem with his clinch, and we kind of neglected working the clinch, which showed in the first fight. And then, of course, we made adjustments in the second fight. You can look at the 2 fights, and like, I was actually, I believe I was winning the first round actually until I got clipped at the end of that round. And against a fighter like Anderson, when you walk out in the second round and you can see 2 of him, like, just one of him is difficult enough to deal with. But with that said, like, I actually had a chance to kind of avenge that loss. I got a second shot at fighting him, and I came up short again. So, no regrets there. He's a great fighter and a great champion, and he'll go down as one of the greatest champions ever step into the cage.
Sure. We're going to wrap up really soon, Rich. We've got another fan question from Corey12. What are your thoughts on the way Vitor Belfort handles the media, most recently pulling out of the MMA Hour when they didn't agree to his interview rules? And as someone who was for Vitor before and who helps with social media for One Championship, is he going about it the right way?
I don't know. Like, you're asking me a question now that I'm not really privy to all the information in his camp. As far as like how his PR wants to handle things, but it's never the way that I've handled doing interviews and stuff like that. I mean, look, you can sit and listen to this interview with me, and I'm pretty candid. Like my answers are, I don't have rehearsed answers or rehearsed questions. Really, it's whatever we want to talk about, and it's just I think that's always been, I think that's been a draw of the fans to me, is that they when you listen to an interview, you know you're getting like the real me, and so that's the approach I like to take, but. Quite frankly, like Vitor may take a different approach. At the end of the day, like what really matters is that you're a fighter, and like if you're winning fights, that's all that matters. I'm not saying that he's being a prick in his interviews or anything, but you can be a prick in your interviews. You can be whoever you want to be, and as long as you're winning the fight, it doesn't matter. So. But look, I know Vitor, and Vitor's he's a good guy, good Christian guy. I know him as a person, and so however they've decided to handle this in their camp is strategically, I guess, the best way to do things. At least they think.
Well, Rich, you mentioned that you'd never practice answering any questions you candid, so we're going to wrap this thing up with a tap-out round. And as you know, the tap-out round can be a harsh mistress with a lot of difficult questions, so prepare yourself. First thing that comes to mind. So here we go. Let's kick it off. Now that you're retired, does this mean that you no longer have a permanent black eye?
Correct. No, it's not permanent, but I actually had one last week because I got headbutted while I was sparring.
What?
It's something that can never escape you. It wouldn't surprise us if, like, 5 years down the road, we see you somewhere and you still got that black eye for whatever reason.
Maybe I'll get a black eye tattooed.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Really mess with people. Now, give us a new favorite morning juice recipe that Rich Franklin has been digging.
Listen, well, I'll tell you what. When I'm in Southeast Asia, I'm a huge fan of dragon fruit. I can't get dragon fruit in the States, so I do some basic greens. It's real simple: some spinach, some kale, a little bit of parsley, some mint, and then either turmeric or ginger. I'm a big fan of turmeric as opposed to ginger. Primarily because it doesn't have as much bite in the taste. And then I throw some fruit in there. And my fruit of choice when I'm in Southeast Asia is dragon fruit. And otherwise, I usually use grapefruit.
Sounds delicious. Now, whatever happened, Rich, to this movie?
Hold on. Does it really sound delicious to you?
Well, I'm lying to you. It sounds terrible. Okay. I would never drink it. I drink Coca-Cola in the morning. That's my drink of choice.
Listen, you can add Coca-Cola to that green drink.
Yeah.
Excellent. But I won't be doing that. Now, next question. In 2011, there were a lot of rumors going around about Hollywood getting the rights to your life story, putting together a movie called American Fighter. Whatever happened with that? When's American Fighter coming out? Why can't we watch it?
Well, I'll tell you what. At one point in time, a production company actually bought the rights for life rights. I don't know what the timeline, like how long the contract was good for, maybe a few years or something like that. And then they actually put money into it. They hired a writer. A writer wrote up a script for the movie and all that kind of stuff. And then I think between The Warrior coming out and Here Comes the Boom, which was like both centered kind of around teachers that were fighters and all that kind of stuff. It kind of like killed the momentum of a true story for something like that. So not to say that wouldn't happen in the future, because each time that I'm out in LA, like I find people that have interest in a project like that, but that would just be a timing, like the right kind of timing project.
Well, if not a movie, now that you're retired, do you think you'll release an autobiography?
Book, you mean?
Yeah.
I would like to do a book or some books. It would be a matter of finding the time. Crap, if I can't find the time for a fight camp, it's going to be difficult to find the time to write a book. But no, I've actually looked into that, and because my experience with writing is that I helped ghostwrite another book, and I probably had more time in ghostwriting the book than I did in writing the book myself, because it just didn't sound the way I wanted it to sound. So that's kind of the interesting thing when you do that. It's finding the right author or the proper writer for those kinds of things. But yeah, if I released the book, I'm not sure if I would do an autobiography or kind of a spin on that, like some sort of like motivational thing that used personal stories of my life that was not necessarily just telling the story of my life in a sense, but something, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll write it for you, Rich. It'll be a lot of stuff about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, even if none of it ever happened. Now, what was up with someone selling a signed, framed Rich Franklin poster at a garage sale? We saw that on social media. What was up with that?
what a steal, huh? You know, I would have bought it myself, but I wasn't there. And actually, I think it would have been quite. I think it would have been quite funny to buy an autographed picture of myself at a garage sale. If I was in town, I think I would have driven over to that garage sale just so that I could purchase it. But no, I don't know. I can't remember what price tag they put on it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you could have picked that up for a steal. That just goes to show you never know what you're going to find at a garage sale.
Yeah, that's crazy. You'd hope there'd be a big price tag on it. Now, Rich, we know how big karaoke is in Asia. What's Rich Franklin's go-to song when he wants to bring the house down?
Oh, you know what? I'll go with some rap. I'll do like some, because I'm not the greatest singer in the world. One time actually I was visiting the U.S. troops in Iraq, and we did this 5K run in like 130-degree weather, and then afterwards they put me on the stage and they made me sing "Sweet Home Alabama." And I'm not a very good singer, so I had a bit of performance anxiety there, especially when you have about 5,000 troops standing there watching you. Like, so I actually have done one concert in my life too. So I'm not only a fighter but a rock star. But when I karaoke, I try to stick towards some rap or some hip hop. Maybe like I'll go a little old school, like some Rapper's Delight or something like that. Sugar Hill Gang, and it's a fun song.
Yeah, it sounds like they put you through some SAS training over there. Now, finally, we know you're working with One Championship and you're working with Armor Gel, but what's next for Rich Franklin? What can fans expect next to come out in the Rich Franklin world?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm so busy over here. I'm constantly on this side of the planet and transiting back and forth. It's interesting because now that I've retired, people they're like, well, what's next? It's like, maybe you guys don't realize how busy I am with One Championship. I think we did like One Championship is going to have 7 shows in like 2.5 months, like on the back end of this year, and so. You know, we went from like last year we had 12 shows. This year I think we netted out at 17, and next year we'll net out at least 24. And so that's 2 shows a month. And while I'm not responsible for all these shows or being at all these shows, like it definitely creates a very, very busy schedule. So aside from that, you know, like I have upkeep on my personal brand, you know, like the fitness stuff that I'm into and the posting and all that. And I kind of do that because I don't know where that's going to lead. Like when we talk about writing a book and stuff, like maybe my book will be something more motivational and fitness. I do a lot of public speaking now. I've spoken at different corporations. I do that kind of stuff for One Championship with partners that we have. I spoke to DuPont over here in the Philippines. I spoke to P&G in the States. So, you know, I speak at corporations and stuff like that as well. And so that'll probably kind of begin to take off a little bit for me. But yeah, I have options with my brand. Fortunately, I speak fairly well. I'm not completely mangled from my fight career. So, you know, I can do a little bit of camera work. I can speak fairly well. I don't stutter over my words too bad. Like I pulled the plug on my career before I took too many punches to the head. So yeah, I have options. We'll see where it leads me.
Well, there you go. He's a man of many hats. We can't wait to see what's next, Rich, and obviously we can't wait to watch the next few big shows at One Championship. Guys, don't forget to follow Rich on Twitter at Rich Franklin, obviously to stay up with all the latest with Rich Franklin. And also, if you're low on inspirational quotes in your life, Rich has a whole bunch of them all the time. And of course, don't forget to go get Armor Gel now at www.armor-gel.com. Rich, as always, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's always a fun conversation with you guys. We'll catch up again soon, I'm sure.
Hey, this is Alistair Overeem, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
And there you guys have it. Rich Franklin, a legend from MMA, obviously former UFC champion, One Championship, vice president over there, doing big things in Armor Gel as well, Cass. I mean, how could you not want to cover your whole body with Armor Gel after hearing those stories? Sounds like a big, big product. I think I might have to check it out myself.
Yeah, I'm going to be like Willie from The Simpsons and be like, grease me up, woman. Grease me up in Armor Gel, that is. That should be the commercial for that. And then the lunch lady looks at the camera and they all smile and everyone's staff free. But anyway,
all the children.
Yeah, all the children.
Staff free children.
The wee turtles, they're too much for us. Let's talk about a few things. Now that the interviews are all done and out of the way, there's a few things to talk about. Actually, there's a couple of things to talk about. We're not going to be so much covering UFC 193 just because, well, sorry, we are, but we're not going to be breaking down or doing a preview on this episode just because for those who listened, we were on SEN, which is one of Australia's or Melbourne's biggest sporting AM stations. We covered it for about an hour and did a previous show with our good friend Adam Kaplan. So today we're going to be this week we're going to be focusing on UFC Brazil and also a couple of interesting notes from Bellator 145. So just to cut straight into it, there was some decent fights on Bellator 145, but what's actually interesting about it was the two big fights that were announced. So the first one was Kimbo Slice versus Data 5000. Scott Coker came out. He's not a man who messes around. He cut right to the chase, and he's like, I'm just going to announce it. It's going to be Kimbo versus Data 5000. And the crowd was absolutely silent because nobody knew who Data 5000 was, so there was a lot of confusion in the crowd. What do you think about this matchup, Dennis? It's basically the fight between two former street brawlers. What do you think of this matchup being the co-main event to a Bellator card?
Yeah, I didn't know what I really thought about it at first because I had to really have a look at who Data 5000 was. But then I started thinking about it and I thought, look, what got Kimbo to the dance is this whole street fighting thing. And even though he picked up some skills along the way, in the last fight with Ken Shamrock, he didn't look like his body was in the best condition. Who knows what's going on with his knees? He had arthritis and issues with his knees in the UFC ages ago. So maybe it makes sense instead of getting some kind of MMA fighter who's going to take him down and probably submit him pretty quickly, or getting someone that will just commit to standing and won't take it to the ground, getting another street guy like Data 5000, a guy who has had a couple of MMA fights, but nothing massive. And also he's 38 years old himself. I mean, a street brawler, two street brawlers meeting each other. They'll probably say some gangstery things leading into this one. And what I liked about it, Cass, was that it wasn't the main event. It was the co-main event because at least that makes the blow a little bit easier. What did you think about it all?
Yeah, well, it takes solace in the fact that that's not the main event. Oh, wait, the main event is Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie in 2015. No, it's 2016, sorry. So we'll get to that in a second. But no, I can see the logic there, and it solidifies the fact that Bellator is not trying to be and I don't want to say they're not trying to be a professional fight organization. They are, but they're not going in that sports direction. They're not that Fox Sports, ESPN look. They've completely, I think they understand that, in order to separate themselves, they got to go in a different direction. They're more, well, Spike TV. It's probably the perfect channel for them. They're like almost like a circus, and they relish in it. Unlike a lot of people and a lot of organizations who are like, we kind of try and stay away from freak show fights. Bellator, they go to the opposite direction. They go after the freak show fights. And both the co-main event and the main event are both freak show fights. Just a bit of background. Data 5000, him and Kimbo, they used to be childhood friends. Data 5000 was also a security guard for Kimbo during all of Kimbo's street fights. He eventually branched off, did his own thing, started his own backyard brawl promotion. There's a movie on Data 5000. I haven't watched it yet, but I hear it's pretty interesting. It's called Dogfight, DAWG, because we got to keep it gangster, and goes for about an hour and a half. It's very easy to find on the internet, so I'm going to check it out. I want to see a little bit more about Data 5000. Just a few interesting notes on the poster for Bellator 149. There's Kimbo, there's Data 5000, and then there's a sledgehammer. I mean, nothing says professional sports and MMA like a sledgehammer.
Triple H might be running in. You never know.
The way things are going, it wouldn't surprise me if Triple H actually came in. The only thing with the announcement, I would have liked to see a promo video. I would have liked to see Scott Coker come out, say, "This is why I'm here. I'm going to announce a couple of fights, and whatever. Feast your eyes on this." And then a promo video comes on. It's Kimbo. He's talking. He's saying something. I don't know what angle they could go with that. He's coming back. Something about how there's one guy I've always wanted to fight, because the thing is, Data 5000 called out Kimbo years and years and years and years ago. Back when we were kids, you and me, Dennis, and we would watch Kimbo on YouTube. Data 5000 was calling Kimbo out, and he's done it multiple times, and the fight never materialized. So, there is a bit of, well, I don't know if I'd use the term interest. There was interest almost 10 years ago, but I think people will, people will definitely tune in. I know I'll tune in, but I wish they sort of piqued our interest a little bit better with the promo video. Kimbo's saying something about this one guy that he's always wanted to fight. Boom, they introduced Data 5000. There's a little bit of a promo video. They show a little bit what this guy's about, maybe show some old footage. That way the fans are like, okay, I know who this is, as opposed to just saying Kimbo versus Data 5000 and the crowd being absolutely silent. Another thing, this fight, Bellator 149, this card is going to be in Texas. Jordan Breen on Twitter had a really, really good point, saying that the Kimbo and Data matchup doesn't make any sense in Texas, but it would make a lot of sense in Florida, where both guys made names for themselves. So just a fun little interesting fact to keep in mind.
I think you have some great points there with the promos, and also no slogan of Kimbo's going back to the streets. I could just
Yeah,
imagine something like that. But I mean, look, I guess they're trying to squeeze this Kimbo rag as much as they can and get as much water out of it until it ultimately dries up and gets put in the recycling bin. So good on Bellator.
Well, yeah, I imagine that would happen eventually. Then the next matchup, this one was a little bit frustrating because you had Kurt Angle come out, and during the show, Kurt Angle did some commentary. He was did a lot of commentary during the Bobby Lashley fight against James Thompson, and it's been teased that Kurt Angle is possibly finally going to go into MMA. He was at the fan Q&A for Bellator. He did the commentary, and they even asked him about it I think after the Bobby Lashley fight, if he'll go into MMA. And he sort of said, "Look, we're testing the water. We're seeing how we go. I'd like to, but I can't commit to anything." So then he comes out, in the middle of when Scott Coker's announcing fights, and then he says, "There's been a lot of questions. There's been a lot of rumors. A lot of people have been asking, is Kurt Angle gonna fight Ken Shamrock?" And the crowd starts making some noise, and then Kurt Angle's like, "I will not be fighting Ken Shamrock. I would love to, but I will not be fighting on 19th because Ken Shamrock is going to be fighting Royce Gracie." And people are like, "Really? Ken Shamrock, Royce Gracie, third time?" I mean, we're living in the past now. Kimbo vs. Dada 5000, that's a very old school feud. So is Ken Shamrock versus Gracie. I mean, these guys started at the first ever UFC. It's crazy to think that we will be seeing a third fight with these guys in 2015 or 2016. Both guys, fun fact, by the time they fight, the two guys main eventing the Bellator show will be 50 years old each.
I almost feel like it was really stupid because Kurt Angle builds everybody's hopes up. It's like this whole Dada 5000 thing. People aren't that excited about it. They're like, what's happening now? It's sort of everything's been teasing. Everyone's been teasing everyone. And then you get Kurt Angle and you're like, finally, this matchup would actually be interesting because a lot of pro wrestling fans would love it. And then, disappears. And Royce Gracie comes out in his gi, Casper. So there you go. I mean, the biggest thing about that fight is, will those guys be able to put on a show? Because the last thing you want is, I don't want to say like an embarrassment of a matchup, but to a certain degree, they need to deliver enough for the fans to enjoy the matchup. And if you go out there and they're incredibly slow and sort of limping around and not much is happening and it looks like a bit of a joke, I think that can hurt the brand. Like that Tito-Stephan Bonner fight wasn't the greatest. And compared to this could be a lot worse. So if I'm Scott Coker, I'd just be a little bit nervous that what happens if these guys can't deliver. Because Ken Shamrock, when he fought Kimbo Slice, it certainly didn't seem like he had many fights left. So I'd just be worried if I was Scott Coker that I don't piss a lot of people off because it might turn them off the product a little bit. I don't know. What did you think about this whole matchup, Cass?
Just in general, Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, Kimbo vs. Dada, it's weird because they are the epitome of freak show fights, and yet it's like a car crash, and yet I can't look away. I'll tune in, I'll watch it. I mean, I'll bite. It's got me curious enough to watch it. I think Bellator at this point, they're doing anything to sort of get an audience, get viewers. And I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. I mean, it'd be one thing if they're trying to say that we have the best fighters in the world or MMA is an amazing sport and look no further to Bellator. Then it would be a joke. But I think they're being very frank about it. They're just saying, look, we're doing crazy shit over here in Bellator. We're doing freak show fights. We're doing stuff to just entertain you. Come over and watch it. They're like really, really close to being a half MMA, half pro wrestling promotion. So I'm not opposed to it as long as they're honest about it, which they are.
What about the matchup? What do you think of the matchup?
Well, I mean, the matchup makes sense from a name's perspective. As far as the crazy thing is as far as what happens in the cage, I'm not that interested, to be honest. I don't feel like Royce Gracie has anything to prove, and I don't feel like Ken Shamrock has anything to prove. And in that sense, I don't care about the matchup at all. It really is just a way to lure people in because Ken Shamrock still has a big name, Royce Gracie still has a big name. And to me, that's pretty much it. The only other thing that I took from that is that Kurt Angle will most likely fight for Bellator at some point. Why else would they bring him out and tease some kind of matchup with Kurt Angle and have him on commentary unless at some point he will be fighting for the promotion? So I fully expect, Kurt Angle to fight at some point, possibly against Ken Shamrock. The other thing that I hope they do for Bellator 149 is stack the card with young talent and some of the more up-and-coming names, so that at least you get people who come in and they tune in for the Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie's, but they stay for the young fighters, you know, and at least that way they'll build some names off it. And another fun fact, Errol Helwani confirmed via Twitter that Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock will be at open weight, and the Texas Commission already approved it. So there'll be no issues here with Ken Shamrock coming in a little bit light. I'm curious at what weight Royce Gracie will come in, but there you go, open weight. Haven't seen that in a very long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the commission lets the fight go on, I guess they'll let anything happen. I mean, these guys, who are they? Maybe they can wear funny hats while they fight. Silly hats. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Like you mentioned, it might be like one of those car accidents that you can't look away. I'm afraid it'll be two cars that accidentally the owners forgot to put the cars in park and they're slowly rolling towards each other. Yeah. Just barely glance each other. Look, I'm interested to see if it works. I'm interested to see what the ratings will be. I'm interested to see if the matchup works. But I'm rooting for Bellator. I'm one of those guys that I'm set in the fact that there needs to be more than one promotion out there. So if fighters aren't in the UFC, they can go somewhere else, make a paycheck, and also possibly get back into the UFC. So all power to them. Hopefully it works out. I probably would have gone a different route, maybe like throwing Tito in there somehow, figured some kind of way to get him in there. But either way, we put that up on Facebook, and most people said they'd watch it. So I think the other problem is that Tito isn't much of a draw anymore, as we saw when he faced Liam McGeary and Bellator 142 Dynamite. Like that was, as far as like sporting and pure sport, as far as the the Bellator version. That's as good as it gets, and he didn't draw very well. Ratings-wise, it was a disaster. You had kickboxing, you had champions on there, you had a light heavyweight tournament with some of Bellator's best names, and he didn't do well. What did well was Tito versus Forrest. What did well was Kimbo versus Ken Shamrock. So I can understand, hey, it's a business. I can understand why the company's going in that direction. But as far as they could have put him in with a legend, though. I think it didn't do well because he fought McGeary. Like if you put Shamrock against McGeary, I don't know how the ratings would do there, but. Look, I don't know if I'd be that interested in seeing Ken Shamrock, to be honest with you, fight Tito. So I don't know where they'd put him. Maybe like against Kimbo. I don't know. I thought possibly maybe they'd put Kimbo against Fedor. But then I realized, like, why would you waste Kimbo if it's not really your company? And then he loses. What does Bellator really get from that? Not much. Like, there goes Kimbo's star. So I guess it all makes sense. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think Kimbo versus Fedor, like, there are some fights where you're like, who knows what'll happen. But I think Fedor versus Kimbo, I mean, it could possibly set records for how big of an underdog Kimbo would be. I think Fedor beats Kimbo 10 out of 10 times. I think people may not be interested just because of the sheer fact that they give Kimbo no chance. Whereas with Ken Shamrock and Kimbo, people are like, well, I could see either way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting. But yeah, Cass, it'll be interesting to see what Scott Coker does. But on the other side of the coin, the UFC world, I mean, they had a big card that we're going to be breaking down. Cass, before we get into this one, what was your general feel of the event? I mean, sometimes it felt a little bit slow. There were a lot of fights on there. That's the big thing. And I looked at a tweet earlier, and it was that the press conference over there, the post-fight press conference, was at 4:30 in the morning. So how about that for media doing their duty? But what did you get from the whole event? What kind of feel did you get from it?
Yeah, hats off to all the media in Brazil. I mean, that's brutal. At least at UFC 193, our press conference is going to be, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. latest?
We get there at 8 in the morning for everybody listening in the States. So I know most of them are used to watching the fights at night, but how about that? Having some breakfast and then enjoying yourself some MMA.
Yeah, we're going to be interviewing people in our pajamas.
With those little night hats.
With the little fluffy thing. And those the candles in with those little cups and the handles.
Our false teeth in a cup. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, look, I actually think this event really, really delivered. I know there was a lot of fights to get through, and the main card was pretty big. I think there was 6 fights on the card. I thoroughly enjoyed it, though. I think I counted 8 finishes to the fights. Only a few of the fights went to decision. I think there was 5 decisions, 8 finishes, and most of the fights were pretty exciting. I thought it was very good. It built up nicely to the main event. It did go for a while. Look, this is one of the events where I watched it. I'm like, Jesus, this is going for a really long time. But I enjoyed it. What about you, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Great fights. A little bit too long. Maybe take a couple of fights off. It'd be a bit smoother. There was a lot of people actually debating about the main card, how long a main card should be. So this one was 6 fights, right, Cass?
6 fights.
Probably just a little bit too long. I'm more preferable to 5 fights, maybe 4 fights on a main card. But yeah, it did seem like it just went a little bit too long. But you can't complain when there's so many great fights. Kicking off the discussion, Chaz Skelly versus Kevin Souza. Cass, what did you think of this one?
Man, this is probably one of the best fights on the card, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Basically, Chaz's biggest success in the first round was that he took Souza down. Afterwards, Souza got back up. It looked like he was getting very, very comfortable. He dropped Chaz Skelly with a massive left hook. Chaz's hands were down, and Souza cut a beautiful angle, stepped to the left, knocked him down, and the knockdown was very reminiscent of the actual knockout of Junior Dos Santos versus Gilbert Yvel. Needless to say, Chaz was in a lot of trouble there. There was a hilarious moment in between rounds where Chaz Skelly went back to his corner. He was very, very visibly hurt. He sat down. The cut man came in. Mark Lehman from Team Takedown, who was in the corner, very, very animated, very, very fired up. The cut man came to check on Chaz Skelly, and Mark Lehman's words were, "Get the fuck out of here," to the cut man. I found that absolutely hilarious. There was no blood, but, poor cut man just doing his job. Chad
was probably the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, I know, right? Chad came... I'd never see anyone talking a Stitch like that. Chad came back over a lot of adversity to get a rear naked choke in the second round. It's a move that's earned him 2 other victories. Absolutely beautiful. I think coming to that second round, it looked like Souza was going to be picking him apart with strikes, and for Chad to come back and get a really, really gutsy performance and really show, what his chin was all about, just incredibly impressive. If you think about the Pat Cummins Glover Teixeira fight, which we'll talk about a little bit later, imagine if Pat Cummins came back and scored a rear naked choke. That's the simplest way in layman's terms that I can explain it for anyone who didn't watch the fight. And the interesting thing is, Mark Lehman did tell him that Souza's back would come and that he would eventually get the move. So there's a lot of good stuff going on there at Team Takedown, but that was a fantastic fight and a fantastic show of heart from Chaz Skelly.
Well, Lehman taking care of business, and old Chaz, not in a bad run at all. I mean, he's had 16 fights, 15 wins, 1 loss. He's one of those guys that sort of goes under the radar because he's in a lot of prelims, and he did lose in 2014. I think some people thought he lost steam, but 4 wins since then. So interesting to see what happens to him next. Now, Cass' next fight on the card, Thiago Tavares versus Clay Guida. Interesting to see that those guys were on the prelims so low down. I mean, I think most people expected Clay Guida to walk away with a win in this one.
Yeah, so when the fight started, it looked like the old Clay Guida might be back. He was bouncing around. He was setting a frenetic pace. He was very, very light on the feet and he's putting together nice combinations. The first takedown, I really like the way he put that together. He threw a right jab from southpaw. He changed stances into orthodox and then threw 2 more jabs. Hitting the second one, he added a left leg kick and another jab that hit. It was a very long combination and one that worked, and then he shot him for the takedown and he got it. The problem is, when Clay shot in, he left his head to the right side of Thiago's body and not in the center. Basically, from there on, it was game, set, and match. Thiago grabbed his neck, he wrapped both legs around Guida while he was in the air, and that guillotine is pretty much impossible for Clay to escape from. So it was over before it started. It was a bit of a rookie mistake from Guida, and not really one that you want to make against Tavares. So big congratulations, Tavares. It was a very quick submission win. Actually, in fact, the fastest submission in UFC featherweight history. And then he reminded everybody that his black bow is not from eBay. Well, we didn't need reminders because we just saw it.
There you go, Cass. It just makes you wonder whose black belt is from eBay. I'd like to find that individual. Now, Clay Guida, obviously, just like you mentioned, a bit lazy with that takedown. No doubt about it in training. I'm sure he believes that he's almost guillotine-proof and just got caught. I mean, he'd be so devastated. Moving up to the fight, Cass, Johnny Case, he got a big win. Tell us a little bit about the fight.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that moved over from Power MMA and Fitness from Alliance. It was a great fight with Jan Cabral, a lot of back and forth, especially in the first couple of rounds. Great sweeps and transitions on the ground. The biggest thing that I want to talk about this one, when they were on the ground, I believe it was, first or second round, Cabral was on top. He was working for a Kimura, and he would have gotten the Kimura if it wasn't for Case legally grabbing his own shorts. All right, it is legal. It's not against the rules, but it's something that happens fairly often, and to me, it was pretty clear that Jan Cabral would have gotten the Kimura if it wasn't for Case grabbing his own shorts. And I was kind of thinking about that rule. You could see when Jan Cabral stepped over his head, he was in a perfect position, he was trying to yank it, and literally, Case grabbing his own shorts was the only thing that stopped him from getting that Kimura. And don't get me wrong, it ended up being a great fight, and Case ended up going on to get a great win. There's another thing that I want to talk about towards the end of that fight that pissed me off a little bit, but just as far as the rule of grabbing fighters grabbing their own shorts, I'm not for it. I think it's something that needs to change. Obviously, fighters aren't allowed to grab their opponent's shorts. They're not allowed to grab the fence or anything like that. So why are you allowed to grab your own shorts? If this was, for example, the old UFCs and people wore gis and you could do gi chokes and things like that. Actually, I don't know if you ever could do gi chokes, but you know, if you're talking about gi jiu-jitsu and you can do gi chokes, or if you're talking about sambo, you can grab the jacket and grab the collar and you can use it to your advantage, or even judo, again, where you grab the gi. I understand all those things. But as far as grabbing your own shorts, it really only prevents your opponent from getting submissions, and it's not like your opponent can grab your shorts or, you know, grab a collar and use it somehow to their advantage. So I'm against it. I think it's a little bit cheap, and I'm not calling Johnny Case cheap or anybody that uses it cheap, because, hey, it is a rule and it is legal, and while it is a rule, you should definitely use it to your advantage. You'd be a sucker not to do it, and Johnny Case would have been stupid not to use it to his advantage, but it is a rule that I'd like to see change, because I just don't think it adds anything. I mean, being able to grab your own shorts, like, is that something you would train in training? I mean, I'm sure your coaches would say, hey, if you can do it, absolutely, go ahead, but to me, it just kind of eliminates the aspect of technique. So I would rather see that rule gone. What do you think, Dennis? How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't grab your opponent's shorts, you probably shouldn't be able to grab your own shorts. And it's probably something that confuses some people. Like you mentioned, Jan seemed a bit confused, and, you know, Herb Dean had to sort of explain to him that it was legal. Yeah, I'd like to see that rule changed. Look, I think a lot of guys definitely do train to grab onto their shorts to avoid submissions. There's a lot of ways you can do that, but I agree with you. I just don't see why you should be able to grab onto your own shorts and you can't grab onto another person's shorts. It definitely stops the action and definitely prevents people from doing certain moves. So if we're going grabbing, then we can grab everything. We can grab the fence, we can grab each other's shorts, we can grab the referee, we can grab a person from the crowd and put them in the octagon. But if we're not grabbing, I agree, no need to be able to grab your own shorts. Let's start an online petition to the White House.
100,000 signatures. The other thing that annoyed me a little bit was the fight was pretty close, but I was giving it to Johnny Case towards the end of the third round. I mean, Jan Cabral, he took Johnny Case's back. Johnny Case struggled to get out of the body lock. Jan Cabral was very gassed. He wasn't able to do much. He wasn't able to, you know, finish any chokes on Johnny Case. Then when they got up, I still thought it was Johnny Case's fight. Not by a landslide, but I was like, yeah, I'd give him the decision. Jan Cabral decides to, with, I don't know, 5 seconds, 6 seconds to go, he puts his hand up. He puts his hands up at the end of the third as if to celebrate. Johnny Case kind of reacts like, what? What are you doing? Sorry, but unless you've absolutely destroyed your opponent over the entire fight, if you put your hands up mid-fight or towards the end of the fight, it's almost begging to get screwed by the judges, and you almost deserve to lose. And I'm not saying Jan does deserve to lose, because the amount of hard work and money and sacrifice that gets put into a fight, I would never say to anyone that they deserve to lose. Unless they, like, I don't know, killed kids or puppies or something like that. But if you're putting your hands up at the end of a very, very close fight, I can't call it anything else other than stupid. And I can't stand when people do that. Husam Palhares, he had a weird moment like that as well a few years. Yeah, don't celebrate unless you've won. Like, I understand John Jones did it against DC. A little bit of a different story. John Jones was specifically trying to clown DC, and it was a fight where he largely dominated, and it wasn't really that close. I can understand it there, but in a case where Johnny Case and Jan Cabral, and I think, well, I'm trying to remember whether there was a split decision or a majority decision. Either way, Johnny Case got the nod, and now Jan Cabral's got the egg on his face. I hope I don't see fighters doing that.
Casper's not a fan of it. I mean, look, it's something that gets drilled into a lot of the guys when it's a close fight. Put your hands up at the end of the round. But yeah, I agree. It's not always the best way to do it, and it's not always the best way. Look, I think the general consensus from most coaches are put your hands up because the judges think that you think you won the fight.
Yeah, but it wasn't at the end of the round. It was before the round ended.
Well, maybe they thought that. Yeah, they probably thought, maybe the judges will think you won because you think you won and you put your hands up. You know how these crazy things work, but don't do it because Casper doesn't like it. What about the next fight, Cas? Gleison Tibau versus Abel Trujillo. Now, this fight was a very, very interesting one because you had these two big guys for the division. Both guys were pumped up and looked great for lightweight. There was a bit of controversy, though, because it was stopped to a lot of people's thoughts early when Tibau had a rear naked choke on Abel, but the referee sort of stopped it before he was able to sink it in properly. I mean, Tibau still looked fantastic, was able to get Abel down on the ground, had some great control, got into mount. The fact that it was stopped a little bit early, people didn't really like that. They got a bit salty about it. Not at Tibau, but just at the referee. What do you think? Did you think that it was an early stoppage?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I definitely think it was an early stoppage. And I watched it a few times just to make sure that I didn't jump the gun. Absolutely. So Gleison got on top of Tebow, and you're right, he did control him. He was looking good. He sunk in a rear naked choke that looked really, really tight. Abel was grimacing, but if you watch it, right when the ref stopped it, Gleison actually lost the hold. Gleison was more in mount than actually taking or having Abel's back, and you could see there was a lot of space between his arm and Abel's neck, and Gleison was trying to turn and get into another crappy position, but in a better position in mount. So I don't know what it was that made Keith Patterson, the referee, stop the fight, whether it was Abel Trujillo grimacing or his eyes closed or what. He did not tap. And if you can see, as soon as Gleison gets off, Abel Trujillo was protesting the fight. If you were out, if you were unconscious, you wouldn't be able to do that. And there was like literally no break. Gleison was off. Abel Trujillo's looking at the referee like, what are you doing? What happened? Had he been unconscious, that wouldn't have been possible. So absolutely, Keith Patterson, massive blunder on his part.
Yeah, and what was actually going on for those people who know their jiu-jitsu was Abel's actually getting his shoulder onto the octagon, getting out of the rear naked choke. That's a textbook way to actually get out. So he was pretty much out of it, like you mentioned, Cass, and it's sort of surprising that a referee wouldn't know such a basic escape when he sees it. Now, a lot of people on the internet talking about the fact that getting submitted, especially with the choke like that, is a lot different to getting knocked out, because even if you go out, it doesn't actually damage your brain like a knockout would. Well, what's your thought on that? If you see a chokehold like that, would you rather see the referee make sure that either the guy passes out or he taps before he stops the fight?
Well, I think if you're not passed out and if you don't tap, you cannot stop the fight. And what Keith Patterson did, I think it was Brian Stan who mentioned he didn't even check the arms. You see this a lot. The referees will either grab the arm and whatever, lift it, and if the guy's arm falls down limply, then it's a good indication that he's out. And if they can't reach the arm, you can do the same thing with the leg. I'm trying to think who did it recently. Someone got Jake Matthews against Wagner Rocker. Same thing. He had like a rear naked choke. It was almost a rear naked, kind of like almost bulldog because he didn't have the back. The referee grabbed Wagner's leg. It fell down limply, and he stopped the fight. So if you're not sure, do that. It takes a few seconds, and it's one thing to take a few seconds to check on a fighter who's in a choke. It's another thing to take a few seconds on a fighter who's getting punches rained down on him. With the choke, you have that leeway. Keith Patterson didn't do that. I think he got, I don't think he freaked out. And look, fair play to Keith Patterson. He was obviously trying to do the right thing. He was obviously trying to stop Abel from taking, any more unnecessary damage. But yeah, like you mentioned, Dennis, the time it takes for any brain damage to set in with a choke, it's pretty high. It's one thing if you're holding the choke for like 30 seconds. Yeah, that's terrible. But if you got it in just for a few seconds, it's not that bad. You can revive someone very quickly despite that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost one of those things that the referees sort of need to take note. Different submissions have different timings for when you stop it. And those rear naked chokes, you really got to let them put the choke on and make sure that either they tap or you check their arm. Otherwise, do not stop the fight. It's some basic knowledge. So interesting to see if that happens. Now, Cass, that was the end of the prelims there. And the main card was kicking in with Corey Anderson versus Fabio Maldonado. Just quickly, on this Corey Anderson-Fabio Maldonado fight, did you think this was going to be a bounce-back victory for Fabio Maldonado, and were you surprised with this fight?
Yeah, Corey Anderson, he's always improving. Fabio Maldonado, obviously, he didn't look amazing against Rampage Jackson, but I still thought Rampage Jackson was a big step up for him. I will say this, though. Fabio Maldonado is the Homer Simpson of the octagon. And I don't mean that in any kind of rude way, but he quite literally lets his opponents tee off on him, I would guess, in hopes that they'll tire. The only problem is about this strategy is that Fabio relies on his toughness and generally makes it to the third round, but that game plan leaves him open to getting finished in the early rounds. And if he doesn't, he's usually down 2 rounds when he enters the third. So, like even with Glover Teixeira, he didn't manage to finish him in the first round, but I think you could have made an argument to have that fight stop. So it's definitely not a strategy that's going to work against the elite guys, and I don't think you should really be testing these kind of strategies. And I wouldn't say testing because he's done it repeatedly over and over again. It's one of the reasons why we love him, right? Because he's extremely tough and durable, but it's not really something that's gonna work against too many guys. And man, Corey Anderson, I was extremely impressed. He took down Fabio repeatedly. He had fantastic timing in his takedowns. There was there was a moment that frustrated me a little bit with Fabio Maldonado. Well, I wouldn't say frustrated, but he just showed his inexperience on the ground. He was on his back. He went for a guillotine despite Anderson being in side control. These are just bad habits that come from, BJJ inexperience. But I really think Corey Anderson, he's potentially becoming a threat in the division. They need to bring him up slowly, but he's been working very, very hard, and I was impressed. He was mixing things up very, very well.
Certainly. And I mean, the thing with Fabio is they mentioned that he was working on his ground game before this fight. But like you mentioned, Cass, with him going for that guillotine, it just didn't look like that. And it really seems like, much like many of the strikers, guys like Mark Hunt, for example, he needs to go back in the training room and really focus up on that grappling stuff. And I know that a lot of the pure strikers, guys like the boxers and the kickboxers, they don't really give grappling much weight. But I think when you're in the UFC and, put on a performance like Fabio did, he just really needs to fill up those gaps so he can at least prolong his stay in the UFC. He's already on a 2-fight loss. The first one was obviously against Rampage Jackson, which can be forgivable. Now you got Corey Anderson sort of taking you down at will, and he looked amazing, Corey Anderson. He looks like he works really, really hard in the gym, but in his next fight, he really certainly does need to focus on some basics when it comes to grappling. I think that's sort of going to be the only saver for him if he wants to stick around in the UFC because, standing around, luring guys into fist fights, it's not a long-term strategy, and he's 35 years old. He's tough as nails, but if he wants to have a few more years in the UFC, he really needs to focus on the grappling, Cass.
Yeah, well, I think thus far he's kind of been, in a way, lucky because he's gotten a lot of favorable matchups. Fabio has. He's been put in against a lot of strikers, but the blueprint is there. If you want to beat Fabio Maldonado, even if you're just a pure wrestler, you can do that. You can take him down, and it just kind of shows that he's not a threat. I'm not saying he has nothing on the ground, but he's not a threat. And, these things of going for guillotines when your opponent's in side control, you can't control them with your legs, and there's basically zero chance of finishing the move. I mean, look, it's one thing to sort of, be in training and to sort of like grappling and rolling with someone, and you go for a takedown, they get you in a guillotine, you go to side control, they get you in a neck crank, and it feels crap. And you're like, I don't want to have a stiff neck tomorrow. I'm just going to tap to this. But in the UFC, the stakes are higher. No one's going to do that. People are far more elite. So, it's just bad tendencies that Maldonado needs to work on. And, these are things that a lot of people are guilty of, especially when they start off grappling. Obviously, Maldonado being a former boxer. So these things are very fresh with him. But I don't even think it's just I don't think it's just the ground game of Maldonado. I just think in general, even in the striking, Corey Anderson was lighting him up. And maybe it's because Fabio was worried about the takedowns, but even in the first round, I mean, it just seemed like he was taking damage at will. So I'd like to see Fabio, make a change, just if only to preserve his health and to preserve his career for, a little bit longer.
Here, Cass.
Next fight I want to talk about is Gilbert Burns versus Rashid Magomedov. Interesting fight. Burns got a nice takedown in the first round. Other than that, he wasn't able to do all that much. He was, from what I saw, Burns is very insecure of himself in terms of striking by the end of round one. And it's probably because Rashid's was so good, so crisp. Rashid appeared to rock Burns in the second round. He didn't rush in. I really like it when guys mix in head strikes with body shots and kicks on a hurt opponent. You saw Conor McGregor do it most recently at 189. And that's exactly what Magomedov did. Burns really didn't appear to go for any takedowns in the second round or all that much in the third. I think much to his demise. I think what happened was Rashid basically shut him down so much that Gilbert Burns didn't really want to attempt much just in case he got countered, which ended up being even worse because by the third round, or actually even the second round, Burns was pulling his punches, and so even standing he wasn't that effective because he was constantly getting countered. So Rashid Magomedov, man, we've got another contender in the division. What do you think, Dennis? What do you think about this fight?
I mean, Rashid is a former M1 global welterweight champion. He was even a Russian Union of Martial Arts hand-to-hand combat Russian national champion.
Wow.
Love Rashid. I love his style. He's a very relaxed guy, and you don't see that very often in the UFC. He's one of those guys that sort of takes the slow way to get somewhere, but make sure he does it properly. I thought he had a great performance, but one of the things that sort of frustrated me just a little bit was he had some moments in the fight where he could have finished it and didn't because he didn't want to push the pace, didn't want to get caught. It almost felt like he was sort of taking his time and he was going to wrap up the fight, but he just took too much time and sort of missed his opportunity to do it. Did that sort of frustrate you a bit, Cass?
Yeah, but I can understand that. He's not the kind of guy who's going to go in there and take risks, and that's sort of what's going to. There are guys on different spectrums. There are guys that have the crazy knockout power and they get finishes, or the guys that are extremely technical and very sound and they don't take many risks. I mean, if you could sort of mix that a little bit, I think that'd be good career-wise in terms of marketability. Because a guy like Gilbert Burns, I mean, standing, even though he's improved a lot, and to Rashid's credit, I mean, he completely shut down Gilbert Burns, basically striking and in terms of any grappling, which, I don't know, I really would have liked to see Gilbert try and take the fight down to the ground because he's an amazing grappler. I believe he was, the BJJ coach at the Black Zillions, and Rashid just shut him down with his striking. So I get what you're saying, but guys like Rashid who have, gotten this far on just using their technical prowess, I don't know how much he'll change in exchange for something that may make him get caught and possibly risk losing the fight.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, certainly in his last fight, he was a little bit more aggressive. I mean, to me, it would seem that he would have to sort of get a bit more aggressive in the future if he wants to be sort of a big name value fighter in the division. Also, he does like to counter strike a lot, which can become boring sometimes if a guy doesn't have a sort of bad output towards him. But nevertheless, I mean, some of the strikes that he throws, the calmest that he, I'm interested to see what happens with the next one. What did you think about Henry Hooft and his corner performance for Burns cast? Now, sort of near the end of the fight, I think it was between the second and third round, he really let him have it. He sort of put his foot down, and he wasn't aggressive or anything, but he's quite loud. What are your thoughts on his approach? Because we talk about it here and there. He can be sort of not negative towards fighters, but he let him know what he thinks. What did you think about that approach that he had for Burns?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it at all. I mean, sometimes you just got to let the fighter know what you don't like. And I think the frustration comes from Henry Hooft seeing what the fighter does in training versus what they may be doing in the cage. So I think from a Henry Hooft's perspective, it's frustrating because he knows, hey, Gilbert Burns, you're better than this. You can do better in training, and you're just not doing what we worked on. So I'm not opposed to it. I know you're not a fan. I think
I don't like it.
Why
if that was me, I'd just get pissed and do even worse. I'm more of a Greg Jackson kind of guy. I like the smooth, relaxing sound of Greg Jackson's voice while someone rubs my chest and puts some kind of water in my mouth. But again, it just depends. And this is the other thing that people don't realize. Some people say, look, he's a bit too harsh. It depends what kind of personality your fighter has. If there's a fighter like me and you yell at him, I'm going to do a lot worse. If there's another fighter maybe like Casper and you do that, maybe they'll wake him up and you'll do better. So, I mean, assuming that he knew what works best for Burns, if that's what works best with him, then I'm fine with it. If Burns is one of those guys that gets low self-esteem like me from a talking like that and would do worse, then I'd have some opposition to it. But I just don't know, Casper.
And I think with Henry Hooft, I guess he knows his fighters pretty well. And I think certain guys, maybe, I wouldn't say guys with egos, but there are certain people where it would really light a fire under their ass. And when you kind of try and convey to them that their back's against the wall, maybe some people would get pissed off and they would use it to their advantage. I mean, when it comes to MMA, where it is about technique and you really got to think, I don't know. I don't know how well
it's a tough one. Like, you don't want to piss them off, but you want to light a fire under their ass. It's a complicated one. We'll have to have a chat about it with him when he comes back on. But nevertheless, it was a great fight.
Next one we'll talk about is Anthony Burchak versus Thomas Almeida. Interesting, man. Burchak really came out of the gate and pressured Almeida. He said he was going to be the guy to test Almeida's chin. And, well, he already got tested against Brad Pickett, but he said he's going to be the guy to finish him and expose those weaknesses because he trains at shoot box, they do hard sparring, and he's meant to be susceptible to getting rocked. Almeida looked to slow things down. He was being very economic at the start of the fight. He was catching with Anthony with a lot of looping punches over the top. And then eventually he found a home for those punches. That was crazy. When Almeida hit that right hook, he hit Burchak on the front of the jaw, not the side, and Burchak folded like an absolute deck chair. It was a gorgeous, brutal knockout. I loved it, man. If you haven't seen that fight, check it out. What did you think, Dennis?
Crazy, crazy stuff. Reminiscent, obviously, of the Lyoto Machida knockout over Rashad Evans. It's one of those ones where they fall back on their leg and you just hope they don't screw up their knee because their leg's behind them as they do it. A lot of people on Twitter are asking if he was still alive, if Anthony was still alive. It was a great example of a brutal KO. I mean, I absolutely loved it. Hopefully Anthony's fine. But yeah, Thomas Almeida, he is a big star, especially over there in Brazil. It seems like everybody really loves him. What do you think, Cass? A big prospect in the bantamweight division. I mean, he's already up there in the rankings, but can you see this guy becoming an even bigger star in the future?
Oh, of course. He's scraping the bottom. Scraping the top. He hasn't even gotten anywhere. They mentioned how he's buying nice suits and he really wants to be a nice star.
Nice suits. Yeah.
I think Almeida's fantastic for the bantamweight division. He's got great, brutal KO power, which is something that has sometimes been a criticism of the lighter divisions. And it's going to be exciting times one day if he and, say, John Lineker fight, or if him and John Dodson fight. So I think it's great. And Almeida puts himself right up there as a contender in the division. And to be honest, I think it's only maybe one or two, or he's only 1 or 2 wins from fighting for the belt. The way he's looked, and, Burchak was a stiff test. Burchak recently, for those who don't remember, he destroyed Joe Soto, a guy who TJ Dillashaw went, I think, 4 or 5 rounds with. I'm forgetting. But either way, Burchak knocked him out in 1 round. And then here comes Almeida with just an absolute brutal highlight reel knockout. I would expect to see him fighting for the title very soon. And the bantamweight division, it's getting pretty heavy up top. That's what I'm going to say. There's a lot of contenders all of a sudden.
Well, a lot of people sort of saying that the rumors are it might be Lineker who gets him next. Can you imagine that fight? That would just be unbelievable. 2 guys walk in there, 1 guy walks out. Would be the slogan I'd use. Yeah,
pretty much. Then after coming to consciousness, the other guy will walk out. Apparently, someone texted Joe Silva to fight Thomas Almeida. I think, who was it? Brian Stan tweeted out that a former flyweight texted Joe Silva and wants the Thomas Almeida fight. So that's either John Dodson or John Lineker.
Well, either way, both options I think are great. And Joe Silva, I'll be interested to see what kind of option he chooses. Now, what about the co-main event cast? Glover Teixeira versus Pat Cummins, Submission Radio alumni, one of the best pancake makers in the damn world. It was a fight that, from the get-go, we knew that Cummins was coming into a big test, and Teixeira, who hasn't looked the best lately, but still a brutal knockout artist. What did you make of this fight?
Yeah, look, Cummins looked really good at the start. I was very impressed. He looked a lot smoother, and he appeared to be mixing things up. He had very good head movement. I was surprised. Glover was throwing big hooks. Cummins was dodging him. After a while, though, Glover figured that out, and he started hitting Cummins with the jab, and he started connecting with some of those big hooks. Cummins got a couple of good takedowns early on, which is, he's obviously been working on his guillotine defense and ending in side control, which is pretty much what Clay Guida would have wanted to do. Equally impressive, though, was Glover's ability to get back on his feet. To me, this is a tough matchup for Cummins, and I kind of picked Glover in this one, even though Cummins was sort of on the rise and improving. Glover's kind of tried and tested. I could very easily have seen Cummins doing the Phil Davis and just out grappling him, but I just thought eventually Glover's going to connect. And I don't know, I just didn't really expect Pat Cummins' striking to be, up there. What did you think, Dennis?
Well, and you mentioned it. He had some great takedowns, and he had that collar tie where he threw the uppercuts, which was very effective as well. Very, very good stuff from Cummins. But eventually, and you and me, Cass, we're not fighters, so we're sort of armchair experts, or we like to break things down. But Pat Cummins, when he was on the fence, he did sort of duck a lot when Teixeira threw punches, and eventually he did time those ducks. It almost seemed like he thought he was safer if his head was sort of closer to the ground. And I mean, how much heart did he show? It was just a really, really impressive display from Cummins, just staying in there. But I was a little bit disappointed that he couldn't keep Teixeira down. And I don't know whether it's because Teixeira is obviously an amazing submission artist, great grappler, or if Cummins was so amped up by the whole fight, he just didn't really take his time with the positioning. There was a point in the fight where he did hold Teixeira down for a period of time, but I think if you really sort of, and Teixeira just did everything right. It might be super hard to keep him down. He probably worked on this, but if he was able to keep him down just a little bit longer for more periods of time, I think maybe he would have had a bit more success in the fight. But nevertheless, Cass, like you, I am impressed with Cummins. I think he has improved a little bit. Just you put him up against Teixeira, who's an absolute wrecking ball. And, that's what happens.
I actually think Cummins improved a lot. He was a lot more confident, even to stand with Teixeira, which I was impressed with. Like, even if you look at him against OSP, he looked extremely nervous standing against OSP, and just even other fights in the past, even against Feijiao, it just looked like he wanted to get away from the striking. This fight, he actually looked comfortable. Like I mentioned, he was ducking those hooks. There was moments where I was looking at the fight thinking, get out of there, man, go for a takedown, and he stayed in there, and he had success. I think as far as Glover Teixeira getting back up, I think that's just more Glover's grappling prowess. He's a very, very, very good grappler. So
super impressive.
And not really many people are able to hold down Glover. That Phil Davis fight, a lot of people thought Phil Davis was getting knocked out, and a lot of people were shocked by that. So, the fact that Glover was able to get up, I didn't find it surprising, but I agree. It was a massive step up for Pat Cummins. Look, he showed an incredible amount of heart. I think he's almost at that point where he's too tough for his own good. I think that one of the worst things that didn't go well for Pat Cummins was that he wasn't able to find his range. Even though he was able to duck out of some of those shots, he wasn't able to find his range, and there was times where he was a little bit too close to Glover. It would have been better if he was either way on the outside or way on the inside, with that clinch, throwing those uppercuts. So
and the pace of the fight, Glover was eventually able to sort of dictate the pace, and I think that's what sort of really threw him off near the end there.
Yeah. Either way, look, that's a good win for Glover. Pat Cummins, I feel like he's still a work in progress. If they go back and maybe give him someone, let's be honest, man, Glover's ranked number 4. He's right at the top of the division. Pat Cummins, was he ranked? I'm just having a look. Number 9. There's other matchups for Pat Cummins. You could give him. I think Pat Cummins versus Rashad Evans would be interesting. I think possibly
it's
even
a tough one, though, don't you think?
Well, if you look at the way Rashad Evans performed against Ryan Bader, and the other thing is Rashad Evans is a counter striker. He's not going to pursue Patrick Cummins like Glover Teixeira did. Glover Teixeira comes forward, Rashad Evans, he hangs back. He's very much a counter striker. I think, and they're both wrestlers. Sometimes Rashad Evans shows up, sometimes he doesn't. He's got knockout power, but not like Glover Teixeira. I'd definitely like to see that fight.
I reckon that's too tough for Cummins. What about maybe, I would go with maybe like a Shogun or a, let's see, what else do we have here? Even like if we want to really step up, like a Rampage Jackson, maybe even a Little Nog, he's still in it, isn't he, Cass? So maybe like a Little Nog, something like that. But anyway, we'll see what happens there. What about, though, somebody tweeted out, and I thought this was a great idea, Alexander Gustafsson for Glover Teixeira. How would you like that matchup?
Oh, I've liked it for a long time. I think there was a few months ago, it's probably a while ago, when we were talking about the light heavyweight division situation. I think this is before maybe even DC became champ. But yeah, or maybe just after he became champ. But I was saying Glover and Gustafsson, that's probably one of the fights that they'll make. I think the time is now. They've sort of been circling each other for a while. And it's a fight that I think a lot of people would like to see. Gustafsson is a striker. Glover is a striker. They've both, even though you would consider them strikers, they both have very good grappling, each in their own right, for sure. Fireworks in a bag. And make that a main event, because I'd love to see that go for 5 rounds, not just 3.
Yeah, no, that's going to be great. So, I mean, someone's going to screw up if that fight doesn't get put together. It's just a no-brainer. Now, moving on into the main event cast, Vitor Belfort versus Dan Henderson. Not the biggest build-up to this one, so sort of people remembering and forgetting about the fight. But, Vitor Belfort's obviously off TRT now and had that performance against Chris Weidman, where a lot of people are sort of questioning whether he could be the same fighter without the TRT. Before we get into this one, I know a lot of people gave this fight to Dan Henderson. Kenny Florian said he thought Dan Henderson was going to win it. What did you think? Did you think Vitor Belfort or Dan Henderson was going to win this one? Because I thought Vitor Belfort would beat Dan. Yeah,
I didn't realize that many people thought Dan. No, I thought Vitor Belfort. We can see Dan Henderson's chin has been going, it's not as strong as it used to. I was watching a breakdown with Brian Stan. He made a very, very good point. Let's be honest. The last few wins Dan Henderson has had, they have been because of his big right. Against Vitor Belfort, a southpaw, it's a lot harder to hit that right hand, because if it's two orthodox fighters, the right hand, it can sneak past and outside of your peripheral vision. But as a southpaw, the southpaw fighter can see that right hand coming from a mile away. So I really didn't think Dan Henderson would land that right. And then you look at the wrestling. I didn't think the wrestling would be a factor. Vitor Belfort's wrestling, it may not be the greatest, but his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, despite what you saw in the Chris Weidman fight, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is good, and Dan Henderson's not really actively going to go for the takedown. So I thought Vitor Belfort had all the advantages. The crazy thing, right, and this is a bit of a bizarre fight, because you've got Vitor Belfort. The guy has had so much controversy just recently. Everything to do with he's basically the poster child of TRT. I mean, it's almost like, thank God Chael Sonnen retired, because all the TRT blame and controversy went over to Vitor Belfort. He had all that weird stuff recently with Ariel Helwani. There was that bizarre interview on Access TV, and then you've got Dan Henderson, who's another guy who's a TRT candidate, although he didn't get as much of the blame. And then now they're fighting in Brazil, which has always been a big criticism for how Vitor Belfort fights in Brazil, and now they're going back there. And I get it. Vitor Belfort is a huge draw in Brazil, but add to that they've already fought twice. It was just a weird matchup to me. But the other thing that I found not so much weird, but I was like, wow, you had the second one, Vitor Belfort wrecked Dan Henderson. You're making a third. How is Vitor Belfort possibly going to top that? Or just in general, how are you going to top the second fight? And I actually think Vitor Belfort came pretty close. He may not have topped himself. Obviously, he looked a lot better in that second fight. But this is still a pretty amazing a win for Vitor Belfort. I mean, another head kick related KO for Belfort post TRT. You got to think. You got to give him a lot of credit, don't you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I think it's a really important win for him because a lot of people were doubting whether he could do anything without the TRT and all the other stuff that's happened to him. So in a long, long time, this is actually probably one of the most important fights of his career because after the whole Chris Weidman thing, a lot of people were sort of poo-pooing him and sort of doubting him, us included, wondering how much of it was TRT. And now we see that, hey, maybe he doesn't look the same, but he can certainly still knock a guy out with a head kick like Dan Henderson. The fight itself, Cass, let's break it down just quickly. An interesting one. At the very beginning, not much action. Both guys sort of stood there. I think the Brazilian fans are starting to freak out. This was not going to end up the way they hoped. Then, obviously, the head kick was thrown. Dan was on the ground. Vitor hit him with some good punches, and there was a stoppage that Dan protested. What did you think about Dan protesting that stoppage? Because I think it was pretty spot on.
No, I think it was fine. If you look at, not only was Vitor landing strikes, and Vitor looked extremely explosive on the ground. I think had the fight not been stopped, there would have been more of those strikes. But the strikes aside, if you look at Dan, he wasn't doing anything to defend himself. His arms, I mean, a lot of people use the word flailing. I'm just going to agree. He wasn't defending himself intelligently. I was perfectly fine with the stoppage. There was also one punch. I want to say it was a left. I think it was a left. And it landed straight on the jaw, of Dan Henderson. After he already got, kicked in the head. And that's the one that put him out. Even though if it was only for 1 second, we all know Dan Henderson's tough. But when you take a guy who's Dan Henderson's age, who has been stopped, via strikes in quite a few of his last few fights, I think the stoppage was perfect.
Yeah, and his head went back there. I mean, it looked like a great stoppage. Now, I mean, the thing is, with Vitor Belfort, he fought Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman's a world beater. He's going to be fighting Luke Rockhold at UFC 194. So, I mean, when you put Vitor Belfort up against Chris Weidman, TRT or no TRT, a good chance is that Chris Weidman's going to walk in there and beat him. Even still, Vitor Belfort still had his flurry, and he still had a good moment against Chris. No doubt about it. Now that he's had this head kick TKO of Dan Henderson, what's next for him, Cass? Do you think this guy sticks around for a while now in the UFC?
I definitely don't see him leaving, not after a win.
I thought that maybe he was going to retire. Like, I don't know, for some reason I had this thing in my mind, like it's a great win. You're in Brazil and you've showed everyone that you can do it off TRT. I thought maybe he was going to retire, but I guess I got that wrong. Then I thought Dan Henderson was going to retire, but I thought, why would you retire in Brazil? Doesn't make any sense. He had this look on his face, like a smile. But anyway, that's neither here or there. But
well,
yeah.
No. I think it's more to the point because the way he was speaking and he said, well, I just want to thank everybody here for all the memories.
And then he paused and he had the smile on his face.
He paused a lot. I thought, I'm with you there. I was like, oh, is he going to do it? I get what you're saying with Vitor, where it would have been a very nice moment. You get an awesome highlight reel knockout. You retire in your own home country. I think he's going to stick around. There's plenty of fights to make for him. I just think they're all extremely tough. I mean, Vitor versus Yoel, that's a tough one. Jacare Souza, that's a tough one. Luke Rockhold, I think Luke Rockhold wins a rematch. I know a lot of people are like, oh no, man, I think Luke Rockhold definitely takes him in a rematch, and then Chris Weidman, again, I think that would play out the exact same. And even in that fight, I rewatched that fight recently, and I don't even think Chris Weidman was hurt in that fight. I think Vitor caught him a little bit, and looked to me like Chris Weidman was just picking his moment and just trying to wait to get his offense in. I don't know. You can do Tim Kennedy versus Vitor Belfort.
Yes, Tim Kennedy versus Vitor Belfort. I mean, what better time to do it, man? Can you imagine the build-up to that fight? I mean, just the trash talk between those two. Tim Kennedy was on our show, I think last week, and I really think and Tim Kennedy's over there in ranked number 6, and I wonder how much longer he's actually going to stay in the rankings because I don't know when he's going to fight next. But I really think this is a no-brainer fight. If the UFC want to make some money with Tim Kennedy, I reckon you got to throw him in there, Vitor Belfort. Can you imagine some of those stare downs and countdowns and embeddeds leading into that fight? I reckon it would be really, really interesting.
The only problem and the only reason why I don't see that ever happening, I mean, yeah, from a fan's perspective, sure. But the thing is, the UFC have been pretty quiet about this whole, UFC 152, Vitor Belfort, John Jones scenario where Vitor Belfort had elevated testosterone levels. And with Tim Kennedy, he already talks a lot about Vitor Belfort. And, any time you ask him, he's very honest about it. He's not the type of guy who shies away from it. So if you do put them against each other, Tim Kennedy's obviously going to talk a lot about the steroids in the past and the TRT. Pretty much the whole build-up to that fight is going to be Tim Kennedy saying that Vitor Belfort's a cheat. And I don't think the UFC want to do that. I don't think they want to promo on, whether it's Fox Sports or pay-per-view or whatever the case is, or countdowns. I don't think they want to run promos like that. You see them already hiding from certain aspects. You saw Reza Madadi recently. He was in jail. They didn't mention it once on the broadcast. And I think they really want to sweep this whole TRT thing under the rug. So that's the only reason why I don't see that fight happening. I could see Vitor Belfort. I don't think they'll put him up against Yoel, Jacare, Rockhold, or Weidman anytime soon. So you got to go someone ranked below him.
Yeah.
You could do Lyoto Machida.
Bisping. Yeah, Lyoto Machida would be good. I mean, Bisping was already being done. I don't really think it would be that interesting, but...
You could do Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. What about Anderson Silva? Maybe avoid that one in case there's some negative headlines.
Yeah, well, again, that's another situation. Like, the thing is with Dan Henderson, I think a lot of people gave him a pass for TRT. If you even, I don't know, Dan Henderson's mentioned, if you look at their body types, Dan Henderson hasn't changed. Vitor Belfort is like, it's like a before and after.
It's unbelievable. It's like you aged 10 years in a couple of months. What about Nick Diaz? Vitor Belfort, Nick Diaz.
Yeah,
2016. Sure. Like, I mean, there's going to be some negative headlines about the weed and blah, 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 but it's almost like one of those fun fights. You put it on in a co-main event slot, and there's going to be two guys. Like, Vitor's not going to try and take Nick down. Nick's not going to try and take Vitor down, and it's going to be a war. I mean, I don't know what would happen in that fight. I'd be excited to see it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Nick Diaz versus Vitor Belfort. I'm fine with that. I could even see them putting him up against Talis Leites. I know there's a big discrepancy, but I just think that, Talis Leites, he's improved his striking a lot. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is very good. He's very well-rounded. I could still see Vitor Belfort catching him with something, possibly knocking him out. I think it's a winnable fight. Really for either guy. If Talis takes him down, who knows? Talis with his knockout power, maybe Talis could even knock him out. But just really quickly, just a few things I want to touch on with Vitor Belfort versus Dan Henderson. I have to say, it is very impressive for Vitor Belfort post TRT to almost emulate that head kick that he got on Dan Henderson. And part of it is Dan Henderson has a really bad tendency to lean into head kicks. So it's not necessarily that surprising. The other big mistake that Dan made in that fight was lowering his right arm when he ducked into the kick. The thing is, when you're not sure whether a kick's going to go to the body or to the head, you sort of duck down and, for lack of a better term, you sort of lean in, but you keep your hand up. You don't lower your hand, you don't lower your arm to sort of just block the kick. You just, you almost crouch down. You keep your hand up where your head is to block it, and then you have your elbow more towards your body so you can block both. And what Dan did is he kind of leaned down half-heartedly. He dropped his head, his arm, and boom, the head kick landed. So not exactly something that's impossible to predict, but nevertheless, I got to say that's a very impressive win for Vitor Belfort.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people are also saying, oh, why is Vitor Belfort fighting in Brazil? It's, Brazil's very heavily criticized for the steroid culture, and in general, they say Vitor Belfort was also running to Brazil where the testing can't get him. Well, it doesn't really work now. With USADA, they'll test you anywhere where you are, and I think the main reason why Vitor Belfort is in Brazil is because he's a big draw, but that did add to the weirdness of the fight.
Yeah, I mean, and it would make sense if they kept it in Brazil for a while. Just one last fight. If Uriah Hall does beat Robert Whittaker, I'd love to see a Uriah Hall Vitor Belfort fight.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be another exciting one, potentially.
Yeah, but there you go, guys. So a lot of KOs, a lot of TKOs, a lot of finishes in this one. And overall assessment, Cass, what do you give this one? Timothy Johnson mustache is out of 5.
Probably give it a strong 3. Strong 3. I wouldn't put it in the 4 range because that's getting to like a pretty amazing card, and 5 is perfect. I'd give it probably 3. It was definitely better than average, and for me, it definitely delivered. It was a stack of good fights.
Well, hell, I'll give it 3.5 just to seem more charitable than you. Now, for fans who don't know, I mean, who wouldn't know this, Cass? UFC 193 coming to Melbourne, Australia. It will be here next week, and you and me will be covering it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have coverage for pretty much all the Fight Week festivities. Our goal is to have the absolute, not only best, but the bestest and the mostest content and the greatest pretty much out of any media outlet. So, I mean,
we want to be beastin'.
Beastin 25-8. If you go on our channel now, there's some fun things. UFC 193 First Fight Series. And these are things that we'll look to do in the future as well, regardless of whether there's a UFC in town or not. But we've got Jake Matthews and Dan Kelly. So it's a very intimate look into the first time that they ever had an MMA fight. You know, you get a few stories, you really get a feel of what was happening on that night, how their fight went. It's very, I mean, the production value is pretty fancy. So definitely check it out.
Yeah.
It's nothing like what we've ever done. Even the thumbnail looks more fancy and professional, just to really drive the point home that we're doing something different. There's also a couple of interviews with Dan Kelly and Jake Matthews. There's a video that's called The View from Etihad Stadium. This is nothing compared to what we'll have. We're going to be there for the Fight Week festivities. So to break it down, do you want to break it down day by day, Dennis, of what we're going to have on the channel?
Yeah, let's break it down day by day. And, you know, just before we jump to that, I want to say on record that these First Fight series, I know a lot of listeners that we have, they're in the US, around the world, and they may not know who Dan Kelly or Jake Matthews are, but I really recommend you guys check them out, because out of everything that we've done in Submission Radio, this has been some of the proudest work, in my opinion, that we've done. So, and me and Cass, we've been planning this First Fight series for quite some time. So definitely sort of shoot us a message and let us know what you think about it. We'll appreciate it. But yeah, let's break it down day by day. So the first day here in Australia is going to be Tuesday, while it's going to be Monday in America. We've got a bunch of interviews lined up. We don't want to tell you who yet, because nothing's 100%, but you guys can expect that on the channel. Pretty quickly later on, we will have those interviews available for you. All people to do with people involved in UFC 193, and I think you guys are going to like it.
Wednesday, we've got the Technique of the Week as usual. I'm trying to think if we have anything else lined up for Wednesday. Do you have anything else on Wednesday?
Well, not at this moment, but you never know. There's craziness happening all around us, so there possibly could be some extra stuff.
There's a few things that we're working on. It's all a timing matter. It just depends on how quickly we can get them out. So we may have other stuff on Wednesday aside from the Technique of the Week. But as far as Thursday goes, there's UFC 193 open workouts. There's going to be, I think, 6 of them, 2, 4, 6. Ronda Rousey open workout, Holly Holm open workout, Joanna Jędrzejczyk open workout, Valerie, Mark Hunt, and Bigfoot Silver. So we'll have all the full open workouts. Probably do a cheeky video of highlights as well, and they'll all be doing little post-fight media scrums as well. So that's going to be on the channel. That's like, I don't know, I think that's like 100 videos already. There's going to be a fun little event for the media. It's called the Oz Harvest Ultimate Cook-Off at the UFC Community Works.
Sounds delicious.
Well, you wait till you hear who the participants are to judge it based on its own deliciousness. You've got Tom Wright, cheeky Tom Wright. You got Cain Velasquez, Joseph Benavidez, Claudia Gadelha, Ross Pearson, Juliana Pena.
Ooh.
So there you go. I can't wait to see what they'll be cooking. We'll be covering that as well. Friday, November 13th, which I believe will be Thursday in the US. Ultimate Media Day, that's what they call it. This is what happens before every event when they come down here in Australia. I think that it happens all over the world, really. You got Dana White, you got Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Valerie, Mark Hunt, Bigfoot Silver, Uriah Hall, and Robert Whittaker. They will all be doing scrums, and you best believe we'll have footage on all of them. There's also some other fun stuff that day. Dennis, what else we got?
Yeah, well, the guest fighters that you mentioned previously, and there's some extra ones there, including Forrest Griffin, Cain Velasquez, Joseph Benavidez, Claudia Gadelha, Juliana Pena, James Tahuna. How about him? We haven't seen him for a while. Ross Pearson, even Sergio Pettis. They're all going to be there. They'll be doing some scrums. We'll be able to get some interviews for you guys. So if you're wondering what these guys are up to, want to know more, unfortunately, it's a media-only event, but we'll be able to get the videos out to you guys. Now, Saturday, Cass, the big one, the one that everybody's looking forward to. And before you tell everybody about what's going to be happening, I just want to remind everyone that for the weigh-ins, you do need to go and get a ticket. It's a free ticket, but you do need to get it. I believe it's from Ticketmaster, So Google UFC 193 weigh-ins. We've also put up links on our Facebook page and Twitter. Make sure you get your ticket. Don't just rock up and line up because it's different this time.
And I think that people are thinking, why do you need tickets? Obviously, they are free, but I think it's because so many people will rock up. If 20,000 people rock up for the weigh-ins, obviously they're not going to be able to have all of them there because they'll probably have only half the stadium, if that, maybe like a quarter of the stadium available for people sitting there. So they want a massive turnout, but they don't want too many people, so they have to turn them down. So yeah,
it's a tough setup as well because you got to sort of put the stage near one side of the arena.
Yeah,
and we were there for that press conference, so I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but definitely don't leave it to the last minute. Just get a whole bunch for you and your friends. And make sure you do it. Don't just rock up and line up. You may be disappointed.
But if you don't go for whatever reason, your good pals at Submission Radio will have the weigh-ins. We'll have... let us know what you want. We probably... I don't know if we'll do the complete weigh-ins from start. We'll probably just do highlights, but we'll definitely do the actual, the main ones. So like the Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Joanna, Mark Hunt, Bigfoot, all those ones. We'll have the separate videos. All of those will be on the channel. And the key this time around for this event will be to do it ASAP, lightning fast. So all this stuff, all these scrums, the weigh-ins, all that kind of stuff, we will be looking to beat every single other media outlet out there in terms of speed and quality. Fancy video, fancy quality, full high definition, and extremely fast.
We'll definitely be working to get you guys angles that the UFC may miss. I know sometimes there might be a video with the dodgy sound or an angle that you guys wanted to see. We'll have a few cameras there for you guys trying to cover it the best we can. And Sunday, Cass...
Oh, sorry. Also, Saturday, Q&A with Forrest Griffin. We'll have that as well on the channel. Full thing.
Definitely find out what he's been doing now. And then Sunday, for a lot of people in America, they're wondering, Sunday, what's on Sunday? Well, here on Sunday at 8 a.m., 9:15 a.m. It's a media check-in. Can you believe it? We're going to be here 9:15 a.m. We will be covering the event for you. There'll be prelim interviews. So with fighters from the prelim, we're not sure exactly who's going to be up for it. It's subject to the UFC on the day, but expect interviews and expect them smooth and soon after they're done fighting.
Yeah, usually the way it works is we'll be we'll be either backstage or sort of sitting cage side, or when the fighters win on the prelim card, they usually bring them out back and they say, do you want to interview them? And we say, yes, please. And then we'll roll out the recorder, etc. So generally speaking, it's whoever wins the fights. And then, of course, we'll have the UFC 193 post-fight press conference. That will be on the channel straight away. So just a whole bunch of content. And that's really just what's official at the moment. There may be other things as well. If there's other fun opportunities that we can jump on, or other things that we sort of have in the pipeline, we'll definitely do that. But yeah, as far as anything to do with Fight Week, we got you covered. Don't even worry.
That's it, guys. And as we wrap up, we just want to explain to you guys that because we will be at UFC 193 next weekend, there won't be a proper Submission Radio show. So don't be disappointed. We'll be back the following week.
Yeah, exactly. The week after that, we'll break it down. We'll talk about our experiences as well. If there's any other opportunities to sort of break things down, we'll find them. But there won't be a full, 2, 3, whatever hour episode on the weekend of UFC 193. We'll be back the weekend after. I just want to say a big thank you for listening. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you to our guests, Rich Franklin, Ben Rothwell, and Rafael Dos Anjos. And don't forget to check us out on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Gifts aplenty. If you haven't followed us during the UFC Sao Paulo fights, a whole bunch of gifts there. And of course, our Facebook. I always forget it, Dennis. What's our Facebook again?
Yeah, it's Submission Radio AUS. So just look for that on Facebook. You guys will find us. Also, if you are listening to us on a bunch of different devices, we're across Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes. What else are we on, Cal? There's a BlackBerry
SoundCloud,
market,
everywhere.
SoundCloud, YouTube, whatever you guys are listening to us on. Tell us what you think. We love seeing your comments. And also, if you are listening to one of those other devices where you can give a rating, if you can, take some time, give us a rating. Doesn't have to be 5 stars, although we can track your IP and find you and knock at your door and cry at your door until you change it. But yeah, we appreciate every review that we get, and we definitely check them all out personally.
That's it, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks.